Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Critical Critique Taking the Stand. Today we're going to have a very interesting Taking the Stand, where we're going to be kind of covering the topic of, recent controversies involving localization and translation / fun Twitter
Also
bants.
piracy.
And also piracy as well. Also piracy and the legitimacy of it and that kind of thing. And joining us today, we've got internet celebrity, Twitter famous man Nathan, who
Twitter famous.
Famous for the week.
Famous for the week.
The reward is death threats.
Yeah, the reward is death threats and pictures of a terror attack. Ugh.
Yeah, it's been a
Not much of a reward.
I'll let you get into that in a bit because
Yeah.
it's been an interesting week for you. Let's just say that much. So I guess what I'm going to do to start off with is I'm going to kind of lay out a timeline of events as I've seen it, right? So the timeline of events that led up to this cast's conception was essentially there was a release from Sentai Filmworks about, from Sentai Filmworks which included a dub for Talaveru, I believe. I don't know which Talaveru because there's quite a few Talaverus. It might have been
That
the
was
first
the
one.
first one.
I think it was the first one, but right.
I think so.
So they released a new DVD/Blu-ray release of Talaveru with a dub, and there was a bit of controversy because there is one change within the dub from the sub where a character is calling another character old-fashioned, and they changed that to them calling them misogynistic, and naturally this caused a bit of an uproar because in my personal opinion, I think the word misogynistic is not the same as old-fashioned. But I'll finish up the timeline and we can kind of get into a bit of that. So that happened. Everyone got mad. Everyone got crazy on Twitter, as they tend to do. And a certain individual by the name of Smug Rico put out a tweet, something along the lines of, do not support Funimation, do not support Crunchyroll, do not support Viz Media, do not support Faku, something, right? The main thing was just that part. And Nathan, you had a few things to say about that.
Yeah, a few things is a bit of an understatement. Let me pull it up.
Yeah, you can pull it up if you
just
want.
so I'll read the entire threads, but if I can, I'll pull it up.
If you want, yep.
Just
fine.
because I think the entire thread adds some context, which is...
If you post a link to the thread in the chat, Ali can bring it up on screen as well.
But then I'll have to
Good
stop
idea.
playing my game.
Oh, well,
Well, that's ruined the immersion.
it doesn't matter. Don't worry.
Right.
This show never had immersion to begin with.
Just overlay the post with like people firing on each other in Solaris will be fine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
it'll work. It'll work.
Right, so there it is. So I'll read it out.
Yep.
Tweet 1. Do support Crunchyroll.
Wait,
Do support
what?
Funimation. Do support Viz Media. Do support Faku. They may not be perfect companies, but unlike piracy, you actually support the creator and translators to some extent. Piracy ruins creators, plain and simple. That was tweet 1, and that was what
Alright.
caused the
was-
storm.
That was the main one that I think people had a problem with, right? That was
Yeah.
But I'll let
Yeah.
you continue. So for context,
Yeah.
I'll let you continue.
Yeah, I'll probably skip the second tweet because that's kind of just me attempting to stupidly dump.
You're trying to put out the forest fire with a bucket of
Yeah,
water.
put out the forest fire because the second tweet was really just me trying to dunk on Smug. I'll be honest, and
Yeah,
although
yeah.
to be frank, who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah, at this point, yeah. So I'll let you continue.
But yeah, also by supporting the official Japanese release by buying books, doujins, etc. directly from Japan is also completely valid. As long as money is getting from you to the creator, you're doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Pay for your freaking media, guys. It's not hard.
Yeah.
I had someone call me. I had someone call me classist for that, and I'm still trying
Yeah,
to.
that was a fun one. Yeah, I was
I'm
like,
still trying to determine if that was a joke or if they were being dead serious.
just pay for your media. That makes you you hate the poor, Nathan. You just hate those poor
Yeah.
plebs who can't afford to pay for things.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'll let you keep going.
Yeah. So let's get that out here. So also, you don't have to support the companies listed if you say buy stuff directly from Japan or whatever. As long as money exchanges hands from you to the creator, it's fair game. I do have some things to say on this, I will say.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Let's
Let's just get through the thread and then we can dissect
Yep.
from there.
Oh, I forgot to mention, while you should support companies like this and the original creators, do hold them accountable. If you have issues with something with localization or company behavior, speak out. Companies will only improve with feedback. This one has 666 likes for some reason.
Yeah.
So,
That's great.
right, so okay, so tonight, one of the major things that I've seen being brought up is availability of these services. I agree, that's a big issue. For some people, it may just not be possible to use these sites, and that is very much something that should be worked on. See, and then I later talk on about horrible subs, but we'll come to that later. But yeah, that's sort of the gist of the thread.
Right. Yeah.
At the time of writing, or recording rather, this currently has 3,529 retweets, 16,714 likes, and oh, this part's gonna hurt. 1,164 replies.
Yeah. So you
My notifications were dead.
Yeah, very dead. I know that feel very well because I had a similar experience once, so I know how it feels to have your phone pinging like once a second at like 1 o'clock in the morning.
My smartwatch was never the same.
Yeah. So I guess from here, right? Because we've got quite a lot of people on the cast today. We've got Lolly, we've got Phil, we've got Ali, and we've got people from different sort of backgrounds and different opinions on the whole sort of
Different continents.
different continents, right? On the whole piracy / supporting these creators kind of stuff. So I guess I'm gonna give the floor to someone else who hasn't talked yet to kind of what are your opinions on this? Someone else, anyone?
Loli, why don't you shoot first?
Huh? Oh, me? Well, alright, so opinions on specifically what of everything that was discussed?
Just I guess, I don't know. Let's just talk about the idea of supporting these companies, I guess, because that's the major tweet that people got mad about.
Yeah. Oh, I should also before we jump into that, I should give a bit of backstory about what I do.
Oh yeah, that's
Maybe
actually a
just
good
to give
idea.
context,
That's not a bad idea. Yeah. So explain to us who you are, what you do.
Right. So, you already know my name, but by the work I've done is aside from doing a bit of games journalism, I
here and there.
do I do stuff for a company called Love Lab, and we bring visual novels and doujinshi and things like that over to the West with translations and things like that, and we push them out through Steam and Faku and whatever.
Yeah.
Our first release has been a visual novel called Lamination, which is essentially a shitpost VN. I'm not kidding. It's
As you do.
the Steam description is basically it rips right on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air intro. I shit you not. It says yeah, here I will post that and the thing.
Yeah,
but you get the point.
the point. You work in the industry. Essentially.
I'm actively in the industry. We've got some. In fact, we actually bit of a scoop, but we do have something we're announcing soon.
Ooh.
And I will say it's uncensored as well. No mosaics.
Nice.
So
That's always good.
we got the go ahead for no mosaics. So we expect an announcement for that over the next few days. But I am involved in the programming. So yeah.
Yeah, so you I think you mentioned on Twitter, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you do a little bit of coding and programming in terms of localizing the software to work on English kind of operating systems and such.
In a nutshell, let's just say there's way too many visual novel engines out there, like holy balls. We've got some of the big ones in Japan, though. Sometimes companies will have their own engines entirely, but But basically, in a nutshell, what I do is, or part of what I do is bringing, because sometimes we have to port things over because the engine won't boot properly on an English machine because it's got Japanese characters in the code somewhere, and Windows is like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
Or sometimes it can't even render English characters in general, so,
So it needs to be fixed up, yeah.
And while with some cases we can port to Ren'Py, which is an English visual novel engine, sometimes we have to straight port to what's known as Kurikuri, which is a Japanese visual novel engine which is about 20 gosh darn years old and has so many forks it would put my cutlery drawer to shame. So yeah, it's it is a mess. So yeah, that's basically what I do.
Fun times. Oh well, that's and I think that's really good. You know, I reckon that's really good, and it's good to have you on because I think it's a very interesting kind of perspective because it's more of a sort of an industry sort of perspective, I guess.
I think it's good to have these open dialogues and stuff, and that's one thing I am glad that came out of the thread because, you know, while I did have a lot of people who were being a bit aggressive,
a little bit over the top, yeah.
and we'll get to that. But there was a lot of legitimate discussion that came out of it, and I'm very glad that there was, and it means that there was open dialogue. But there was a lot of open dialogue between people who were in fan subbing, who were in the industry. We had some people from Funimation in there who were actively talking in the threads. Which was quite something because they actually gave insights about how the industry works in a way of what streaming does in regards to when a show is actually running. So that was interesting. I do want to touch on that, but it was a very interesting thread and a lot of good discussion came out of it. And for me as someone in the industry, you know, I'm not inherently involved in the translation and localization aspect, but still I do stuff in there, and I inherently know how.
You're connected to a lot of these people, that you know,
so I know how things work.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's important to have open dialogues and discussions about this with people, since you know.
Yeah, it helps foster mutual understanding, so we can better kind of figure out what the problems are and what possible solutions are, which I guess is possibly what we could transition to, because I feel like a big issue we have is the companies you listed. Right? You've got Crunchyroll, Funimation, Viz Media, and Faku. Now, I guess we should probably start talking about Crunchyroll.
Let's start from the top down.
Let's start from the top down, right? And everyone else can join in, right? Because everyone else is being very quiet, and I'm like, I don't want this to be the Kiwi cast, right?
No, if we had Bio on, this would be the Kiwi cast. No, I was kind of just waiting for him to finish on that, but no, that's definitely an interesting thing, because most of the time when people are talking about localization companies in the US, they're typically not thinking of the people who are having to do the programming work. Also, I know, at least from a few people in the past I've known who've done fan translations for visual novels, that your entire thing on every company having a different engine is completely fucking valid, and I feel so sorry for you.
Dude, there's a GitHub full of extraction tools and stuff like that for each engine, and there's scripts for how you extract each thing, and that folder, which contains all the scripts for extraction, is so long. It's just, there's so many companies.
Yeah.
Even individual companies will have their own engine that only they use. It's
I know H has. I know the publishers of Love have their own engine for basically everything.
RJ has their own engine. Frontwing have their own engine. It's like I'm pretty sure Key have their own engine. It's a mess. It's a clusterfuck.
Do you by any chance have an extraction tool for LifeMaker free games?
Maybe I'll hook you up with that. I'll see.
Yeah, because I guess we should also say that Ali, you do a little bit of the translating. A little bit.
A little bit of the translating.
A little bit every now and then. There's a little bit of a side thing that you do.
I should be translating more, or instead, as my.
I think that's the plight of every translator. Like I talked to my boss, and she's like, "Oh gosh, I really should be translating more."
Yeah. So Ali, when his internet provides, can possibly give us some interesting insights on that side as well. So yeah, I guess we should probably dig a bit into some of these issues, right? So Crunchyroll, I think the main issue that I have a lot with Crunchyroll is I have issues with the service as a whole, right? Because the issue with Crunchyroll that I've always had since, I guess, I stopped using them way back years ago was, initially it was because they never had anything in New Zealand, initially. And then the other problem was that I'd have to wait a week because I wasn't paying, because I was a kid, and kids don't typically have a lot of money to pay for subscriptions, right? So I was using the free version, I had to wait a week, and that meant I would be out of the discussions, and at the time I was on another podcast, and that was a no-go. I had to kind of catch up. But then, since then, a big issue that I have is like every time I look at Crunchyroll, I don't see any actual innovation going on. I just see stagnation. And that's a big problem, because when I look at, let's say Anime Lab, right? Because Anime Lab is the New Zealand, I guess,
New Zealand and
equivalent.
Australia.
Yeah, so New Zealand, Australia, and I guess it's like an equivalent type of service, right?
It's also where most of the Funimation catalogue is going now, because
Yeah,
there used to be Funimation Now. That's now being pushed over to Anime Lab. In fact, it is all pushed over there now.
Yeah, because I think that there's some sort of deal going on, or some sort of like
Madman
agreement,
Anime Holdings is a subsidiary of Funimation, I think.
And that proves the problem. So we'll get to that in a minute.
Although they're still operating independently.
Yeah, they're still independent, but we'll get to that. But the thing with Crunchyroll that I have is that they kind of stagnant, because if I go to, let's say, crunchyroll.com right now, right, and I look at their website, it legitimately to me looks exactly the same as it did like 10 years ago.
And that's because, and the thing is, you're right, and I actually had that exact same thought a couple of days ago when I was going through, I was on my Twitter, because I was going, and I'll be completely honest with you, I've been very on and off with watching anime. I'm more of a visual novel guy, but mainly because I have ADHD, so sitting still for a long period of time can be absolute hell on
earth. I know that feel, don't worry. I know that feel.
But yeah, I decided to make an anime list and decide, okay, let's go through here, make a bunch of stuff, pick a bunch of shows that I want to watch and put them on the list, and we'll just work through them. So I was going through Anime Lab first. I was scrolling through, looking at all the thumbnails, checking all the series out, thinking, okay, let's see what this is like, adding them into the list. Then I went over to Crunchyroll. I was like, oh, Jesus. The site was just a mess. It legitimately hasn't changed from in about, I think when I started using it was about 2014, 2013.
It would have been older for me, yeah.
It has not changed.
As somebody who is old enough to remember back when they were still a illicit streaming site, their player hasn't changed terribly much either.
Yeah.
Although I will say there is an upside to the fact that their site hasn't changed, and that is the fact that a lot of their apps still work.
Well, people have been reporting differently on that.
I mean, when I say a lot of their apps still work, when I say that, I mean, I'm not talking about like the actual apps working, because sometimes they have issues. I'm talking about the fact that they have a big load of legacy apps, like for the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation Vita.
I get what you mean now.
I have my Vita right here in front of me at this point in time. I can legitimately, I will pull up. You can probably hear it, but
probably, I get what you're saying. Yeah, like the legacy stuff, because they haven't
I can pull up. I'm just gonna start it. I'll just start it up while we're talking. But I downloaded it from the PlayStation Store a couple of days ago on the Vita, and it actually still works. It actually still works, and I'm like, what?
So that is interesting, actually. But the thing was, right, is when I look at, like, I was making the comparison between them and Anime Lab, right? Because when I look at Anime Lab, their site is very flashy, it's very modern, they have interesting transitions, it's very snappy as well, right? It's very good, easy to use.
It's good web design.
The UI is really nice,
I'll
right?
put it simply. Anime Lab has good web design because you can look through pages and there's big thumbnails to show you what things are, and you hover and it flips over and tells you if something's sub or dub or whatever, how many episodes there are, if it's simulcast, all of that stuff.
Yeah, you get a lot of information.
Got a lot of information crammed into a small space, whereas...
Yeah, and that's good.
It's easy on the eyes, whereas Crunchyroll, their web app, their web application is goddamn terrible.
Yeah, it is.
Interestingly enough, after just loading it up on my Vita here, the Vita app is actually really good because it has smooth transitions. It tells you what episodes you're on. It tells
It's like
you all of that stuff.
they spent more time on the bloody Vita app than they did on the website.
Yep, the website is legitimate trash.
So that's a problem, right? I feel like that's
Yes.
a big thing with Crunchyroll, and that's. I think there are more issues with Crunchyroll, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like all of these issues stem from the fact that they're stagnant, and I feel like the problem, and the reason I have a problem with your kind of, do support Crunchyroll as in your tweet, right? The reason I do have a problem with that is I feel like the only way that we're going to get Crunchyroll and some of these other companies to not stagnate is to speak with our wallets and say, look, we can't. When you're not providing us with a service that we find is satisfactory, at least on the web app, right? We want better, right? We're just not going to give you money, and I feel like that's a lot of people's stance, right? Because that's been my stance for a number of years, and that's why I tell people not to use Crunchyroll, because I feel like unless there is some sort of diversion in the flow of cash, I don't think that they have any reason to kind of innovate, in a sense. And innovation doesn't just mean stuff like, well, they have new features and, new integrations. It also means stuff like, hey, maybe we should update the web UI. Hey, maybe we should update the video player. Hey, maybe we should, do some quality of life things on the site to
be
make it
fair,
easier to navigate.
they did finally add an HTML5 player after
after a big
lot of
Yeah, it was
Now-
a bit of a hassle for that. I remember Digibro's videos about that back in the day where he was like,
Now-
this is just unacceptable.
Now, I do want to say, actually, is that in the meantime, while you're talking about your stance on how, showing support with your wallet or not speaking with your wallet,
Yeah.
I'd like to actually offer up a alternate perspective, courtesy of an industry friend here who also is a Kiwi, would you believe?
I think I know who you're talking about, and I
Yeah,
have big problems with
yeah.
his friend as well, so this is going to be fun.
Sorry, but on Takahashi, he's a good, he's a friend, active in the industry, but he does make the point of how, well, his thread here, I'll read out the things here. This is, I've made posts about Crunchyroll's poor, actually, I'll also post it in the...
Yeah, I don't know if we need to go through the whole thread, because I know the Pacific, Pacific thing that you're talking about.
The
and
main thing
it's-
is what he's saying is that if you take money away, what's going to happen is that while taking money away has, it's done changes in the past, what it's more likely to do is impact those who are already in a bit of a crap position first, before it actually hits the people you want to.
I'm
And
trying to
often...
find
often, if you are someone who is, and often, a lot of the time, if you're thinking from a company perspective, are you going to listen to people who are paying for your site, or are you going to listen to people who are not?
Right.
And it's a very interesting debate, because I guess the thing is that what it brings up is that there's no real silver bullet answer to the question.
I'm looking for the one tweet that he posted that pissed me off, because there was one part of this. There was one part, and I linked this part because most of us have talked about this internally.
I do want to say one thing that I think he's genuinely missing, and this is kind of one of the things that, at least from somebody from the U.S. perspective, somebody who's had to deal, let me put it that way, with Funimation for years. My first DVD I ever brought back in 2006 was a Funimation DVD for Gunslinger Girl, so I have experience with, the output of that company. One of the problems that people have, I think, with on Takahashi's perspective on this is that they're not listening to their paying customers either, and they don't really have a financial reason to do it. That's kind of the problem with the industry, localization in the industry at the moment. It is a fear and loathing situation. Nobody trusts the companies at the helm. The companies at the helm are employing people who are openly antagonistic to their customers and anybody who raises any sort of objection to their practices. And you know, if you were to financially support them, it doesn't even, I suppose it wouldn't even matter either way if you were to financially support them or not. Because as of right now, they're being merged into Aniplex USA, which is being merged into Sony. This is just an economy of scale thing. They're attached to one of the largest media giants in the damn world. They don't care. Like, that's kind of the problem.
I found the two tweets.
That's
I found the two tweets that I was talking about. So I'll read these two tweets out because these were the ones that I had the most problem with. So he says, then how do you fight back or boycott the agenda setting in your translations? The first and foremost, and this is very important, you have to be a paying customer. Companies don't give a shit about the opinions of people who don't buy for them. If someone who read a scanlation...
If only Marvel Comics and DC Comics would have that philosophy. Right.
So he says, if someone who read Scanlation complained about my translation choices, why would I care? They're not my customer, therefore they don't matter. Company thing. But companies have to care about their customers and things in charge of... And things change if paying customers complain. Now I'm trying to find... Because he proposed a possible method of boycott where he was talking about how what we should be doing is everyone buys a Crunchyroll subscription, then cancels it, or something like that, right? And the problem I have with that, and why I think that this logic is flawed, is that involves giving them a shitload of money, right? If everyone who pirated, right, just suddenly said, right, I'm going to buy 1 month of Crunchyroll subscription, then cancel, just to because his idea is, that will show them like the amount that they're missing out on, right? That I find that to be incredibly flawed because one, you're feeding the beast, right? You're feeding the serpent. You're giving them a massive chunk of money. Like, that's a big boon, right? Even if it's temporary and it's only that 1 month, that is a huge amount of people giving them money, right? And then the problem after that is, okay, so all of these people have now stopped subscribing. They're probably going to make up that loss in another month with new people coming in. Because that's the thing. We're in what I would describe as, if you look at the statistics, a growing industry. Like, the foreign market for anime and manga is progressively growing as the years go by an extreme amount. Like, if you look at those statistics, it's like, 56% something is foreign sales, right? Like, it's big. It's huge. And it's only getting bigger. So any amount of people that are paying in and then just immediately dropping out, that's just going to get completely replaced.
I do want to point out something real quick, Mwetsu. It's not that the anime industry is growing. It's that the anime licensing industry is growing. It's very important to point that out because, let's be honest,
true.
are these studios actually making more on the licenses than they have before? I mean, I've read articles and stuff like that, that say, well, it's just like another production committee check. That's it. It's like another production committee check. And it's like, okay, so, and that's the other thing. Like, let's be honest. We're not helping the creators by buying the product from a company that already paid the licensing fee. They already paid for the licensing fee. Like, that's done and over with. It's a flat rate. It is now, but here's the thing, it's now incumbent upon that company to provide the market with what the market demands. And if the market demand is not satisfied, then you have no reason to expect to make a profit in that regard, right?
Yeah.
You are supposed to supply something that there is a demand for. And you're not, if you're not doing that, well, here's the thing. What I see on Takahashi, what I see a lot is, maybe you guys are too young to remember this, but around the year 2000, the whole Napster craze, everything like that.
Yes.
I remember reading.
Oh, good God.
I remember reading. Yeah. Now, Napster did.
I was way too young for that, but I do know about it.
I lived through it. Now, Napster actually did severely damage the music industry. But I remember reading an article in Rolling Stone sometime around 2002 or so, right? Back when Rolling Stone was good. And I remember reading an article where they were interviewing this high level executive that worked for a record company, and my memory is extremely vague. Maybe somewhere out there in internet land could actually pinpoint the exact article that I was reading, but this guy said, if we charge the kids $50 for a CD, they'll buy it. Like, the arrogance and hubris that this man had was incredible. And what did the kids do? They went to Napster. Now, what happened down the road, like almost half a decade later, yes, they crushed Napster, but then by that point you still had not LimeWire, you had other forms of downloading music, right? What happened that by you know, the music industry was irreparably damaged by this point. That's why music pretty much after 2005 or so just turned into like garbage.
Then,
but-
although I do want to say that what has changed the music industry nowadays has been the flip-flop from buying individual CDs to subscription services like
Yes.
Spotify, which have been changing
Yes.
the landscape
Yeah.
Well,
significantly.
you had
And
iTunes that came out first, and what happens is, if you provide what the customer wants in a convenient and inexpensive manner, you just suddenly discover that the customer is willing to go the legal route.
Yeah,
They're not.
And you see, yeah, and using music is a good example of this because that's what happened with me. I pirated all of my music for a long time, and then Google Play came along, right? And they have Google Music, right? And I liked Google Music because you can dump your own library of MP3s into it as well. It's not just
represent.
Yeah, I quite like it for that. I've heard that you can now do that in Spotify and a few other services, but at the time I was only aware that Google Play allowed you to do that, right?
Play
so I
Music
would
is still probably the best bet though. It's free up to like I think it's like 50,000 songs or something.
Yeah, it's a big amount. You get like a huge amount of free stuff.
Yeah.
Like
they count by songs, not by total
by
size
data,
of
yeah,
songs,
yeah, it's
which
good.
is excellent.
It's really good. So I switched to that, right? And eventually I kind of like I was using that to just dump my library in, but then I also started seeing wait, holy shit, there's a bunch of artists that are on the store that I would never expect. One of my favorite bands, which is I can't remember how to say the names, the Onigoshimasus or something. It's a band that's the bassist is Yushi P, who's one of my favorite Vocaloid producers, right? His band is on Google Play now. And I can buy all of his albums and all of his singles and all of that on Google Play for pretty decent price. It's like $14 for an album and like $1 a song or something, right? Like that's really good. That's good value. And so now I will
I've gone
buy.
through a similar thing as well.
Yeah. So now because I have that easy access, right? I can just because I would have never been able to buy this before because obviously it's a very niche Japanese rock band, right? That's only really operating in Japan. But because they're now on the service, I can buy them and I can support them and give them money. And not only that, I also have because I am one of the suckers that pays for YouTube Red, right? Because but not because I like YouTube Red. Because if you buy YouTube Red, at least at the time when I was sub to it, you got Google Play Music for free as well. So I could get the combo, and then I could, instead of just buying Google Play Music, I could get YouTube Red as well as an extra. So so now I have access to that whole library, as well. So every song that's on Google Play already, I can listen to without having to buy it individually as well. And it's just super convenient, And I feel like that's the issue we currently have right now, as Fulvinaus kind of explained, is we don't... Crunchyroll is not really all that convenient in comparison to, any other website where you could watch anime. I'd even argue that torrenting is more convenient because that's.
And I will say I had a similar thing with music as well because I'm into very niche Japanese electronic music, and there was a time where there was no way for me to, and a lot of the stuff was released at Comcat and stuff. So there was a time where a lot of this stuff I couldn't easily get it without, having to freeload, which sucks. I didn't like it, but then things happened. Then we started getting the Bandcamp movement, and now a lot of the stuff is not only on. I can get stuff on a lot of stuff on Spotify, which is excellent. But if I can't find it on Spotify, a lot of the time it's on Bandcamp, and I can buy the album for a good price.
Yeah, and and it's the same thing because I as I mentioned, I like Yushi P, and he's a Vocaloid producer, right? There's a lot of Vocaloid producers, right? a lot of their music is really, really, especially the older stuff, is really hard to come by, and that's why sites like MikuDB, which is the download one, where you can find almost any bloody anything Miku or Vocaloid related, you can find on there, and that's why I feel like a lot of those sites kind of do have a reason to exist, right? Especially for archival purposes. But back to the topic of, I guess, Crunchyroll and tying this back into streaming, I feel like the issue with, again, on Takahashi's perspective, is that I feel like if we were in a different scenario, such a boycott could work. But I think we're at a point now where the serpent is simply just too big, and the way that we stop the serpent is to starve it. We have to go after the newcomers, right? Because he isn't wrong. He isn't wrong in the idea that, oh yeah, they don't have a reason to give a shit about, people who that are not subscribing, and that's why the people that are boycotting and are not subscribing have to go after the source. They have to get the new people coming in and go, hey, hang on a minute, look, there's problems here. We have to try and solve this, and it's a bit of an uphill battle almost, right?
It was absolutely almost a mountain climb, because the problem with this type of protest is that this assumes that the companies involved don't have a moral juxtaposition to the people protesting, which is kind of the problem. We don't live in a market now, especially in the U.S. with how divided things are, that is neutral politically, and you saw this almost immediately with I know there was that one troll post where somebody was going out of their way to be like, oh, everyone who does this is all right. Yeah, I understand that was a troll post, but what that troll post was making fun of was a very real thing. I saw a lot of people in that conversation who were being like, oh, well, I mean, you only, or they were trying to compare the people who were, pro-piracy, or at least proponents of it, to being right-wing or something like that, which is kind of the problem here. At this point, you're trying to tell these companies that are politically invested in the current climate to change their practices, and they're just going to look at it and be like, screw the money, I don't want a bigot dollar.
Right.
And then what's happening? And this is something that they want to constantly and consistently deny. I mean, if you've been paying attention to a lot of the stuff that has been going on, for example, like in the entertainment industry in the United States, or even in England, right? If you pay attention, like Doctor Who's viewership is the lowest it's been since, forever. You've got the CBS is trying desperately to figure a way to get rid of Secret Hideout and Kurtzman, because they've been destroying the Star Trek brand name. You get a Forbes article that Star Wars its brand might be irrevocably damaged. You've got DC just lost their CEO, DC Comics, and the AT&T basically said, we have no sacred cows. You guys are on the chopping block, at least your publishing arm, if you don't turn things around. And Marvel is in trouble, as their publishing arm is in trouble as well. So you've got these things, and it's not because these companies got filled by or suddenly adopted a political stance, right? No, what happened is you've had this huge influx of college grads that hit the scene somewhere between 2008 and 2012, and they started flocking into all these different industries, and they brought their politics with them, which they had learned in college, and now they bring their politics with it, and they're discovering. At first, they could bully their opponents. At first, you could say things like, oh, if you don't like this or that, you're an alt-right Nazi. But, oh, goodness gracious me, that's not working anymore. Like, we can't bully people by calling them Nazis anymore, because they're not going to see the movie anyway, right? People are tired. They just want good stories, and that's what a lot of people are saying. And it's got to the point where, though, I mean, I myself have experienced, it's a whole once bitten, twice shy. Whereas something, that was innocuous, that actually did have representation. As soon as I see something with like representation of minorities or whatever, I'm knee jerk looking for like this far leftist agenda in the show now, or in the movie or what have you, and it's like, it's like I've been programmed almost to detect this when it's even not there, because now I've developed this kind of like paranoia about it. These people have, and what you've got is a sort of scorched earth mentality, because I mean I've been a Star Trek fan all my life. Yeah, fuck Star Trek now. I honestly haven't liked it since J.J. Abrams.
Well, can I? When my internet still holds, we're kind of getting off the point.
Yeah, I was going to say.
The point I was trying to make, right, is that don't be fooled that these things won't have an impact, because people are getting sick of it, and more and more people are noticing when you throw in a mistranslation, a deliberate mistranslation that is designed to push an agenda. And the other thing is, these things aren't timeless either, right? What was it, the show where they made the Gamergator reference?
Prison School.
Prison School.
Really? You're going to put that in the dub? That really dates it.
That was a pretty bad decision, I will say. And
but
these companies are far from spotless. And I personally think that if you're gonna do a dub, you want to try. Your localization has to be pretty good. But if you're going to do a dub, you should ideally try to stick as close to your official subs as possible.
Well, it's not just that. The whole thing with translation, right, and translation studies is, it's well established in translation studies that you want to make a translation as unobtrusive and as invisible as possible. You want the viewer to forget they're watching a translation. And what is going to remind me of something that I'm watching something that is translated faster than a cultural reference that is specific to my society, right? Not something that is specific to Japan, right? And of course, yes, you have to localize things like idioms or jokes, perhaps. That's one thing.
Kanji puns.
But but that's a linguistic problem. When you're talking about, you're putting in something that is deliberately inserted, you can't hide, and that's the thing. You cannot hide behind the localization. Oh, we're just localizing it. No.
Yeah,
no, that's bullshit.
This actually goes into a topic that I've been arguing quite a lot about. How we need to separate. Separate's the wrong word, right? We need to stop considering these bad localizations, and call them for what they are, which is bad translations. Because the thing is the word translation technically already encompasses a lot of the things that people consider to be localization. The idea that we need to, as you mentioned, idioms, right? Some cultural stuff, right? Changing some of that so that the translation flows better in the new language is already something that's technically covered under translation. And you see this when we talk about different media, right? A common thing
it's the factors.
Hang on, I'll let you go,
Sorry.
Nat. I just want to finish, right?
Sorry.
The issue that I see is that Korean movie. The one that came out recently.
Parasite.
Yeah, Parasite. The big movie that made all the Oscars and was really successful. Do you think the person who translated Parasite would consider his work a localization? That's a question I want to ask the panel, right? If you think about this for a minute, right? Would the professional translator who worked on Parasite and made Parasite, available technically to the Western market by translating it, would they consider the work that they did a localization, or would they call it a translation? So I'm interested to see what people think about that.
I think, for me, I guess the thing for me is what I was going to say is that translation and localization, the two words. The thing is that someone did bring this point up in the thread, and oh god, right, okay.
That was Discord. Don't worry about it. Just keep going.
Sorry, yeah, but what a point someone did bring up was that translation and localization, a lot of medium, like, basically the only mediums that we really call it localization is video games, anime,
Yes.
manga, stuff like that. And that is actually a point, because the thing is that it's not like you're doing a different process with these other bits of media generally. It's a lot of the process is the same. A lot of it is the same. It's localizing it, well, not localizing. It's taking things and making sure that they make sense in another language, rearranging words, making sure that jokes and idioms and character development gets over the language barrier properly. It's
getting the original meaning across.
Yeah,
Even
it's
if
just
even if that requires changing like a few words, I think
because-
I'll let you finish, but the example that I like to use is if you had a saying in Japanese that was something along the lines of monkeys versus dogs. Let's say that was like a common Japanese phrase, right? They had like a saying it's similar to cats versus dogs, and that's where I'm getting at, right? If someone who was a translator looked at that, they would go, okay, well, Western audiences might not understand that, but they do understand cats versus dogs because it's essentially the same idiom / joke, but different animals. So we'll change the animal to cat versus dog. You're still getting the same meaning. It's the same thing. It's just you change the word. And I feel like 99% of people don't have a problem with that. There's no issue at all. But I'll let you finish.
Yeah, the thing is that stuff like that is exactly what localization should be doing. And I made this point in the thread, is that there's like good localization and bad localization. The thing is, bad localization is the stuff that sticks out, and that's what people usually point at when they go, oh, localization terrible. But good localization is the stuff that is inherently usually required in order for things to make the jump properly.
And it's kind of like what Phil Bernardus was saying. It's kind of like what Phil Bernardus was saying, where good localization, quote unquote, would be the stuff that is invisible, that you don't notice, right? And I feel like that is part of it. But I feel like, as you said, the idea of good versus bad localization, I feel we need to kind of move away from that and start talking about this as a translation. Right, because when we say good, because I'll let you finish, but like when you say good and bad localization,
like Kanye West, man. I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying. I don't like to interrupt. I'm trying to finish, right? So when you say good and bad localization, the problem inherently is that a lot of people will use that as a shield. They'll go, okay, so it's a good and bad localization. Oh, so it's a localization, so that's it's expected that you can change things, and it's like having your foot in the door to be able to have that wiggle room, right? For people to kind of justify changes like the Gamergate thing and like the stuff that Dragon made. And I feel we need to kind of close the door a little bit on that.
Well,
we need to kind of go...
We just got to call it for what it is. As you say, you're being intellectually dishonest.
True.
You are being intellectually dishonest with this argument. End of story. We're not having, just don't... I'm at the point where it's just like, don't even bother arguing with these people. Mock them and move on. Because it's just that the rampant level of intellectual dishonesty. I mean, I'm reading on Takahashi's tweet, about the whole poor rates, worker treatment, etc. And I'm sitting there looking at this, and I'm like thinking, like, man, this is so intellectually dishonest. He's basically saying, if you boycott. He's putting a gun to basically saying that the company's putting a gun to the workers' heads. I'm like, that's
to an extent.
That is no, not to an extent. That is basically what he's saying, and it's also an appeal to emotion. It's appeal to consequences. It's all of these logical fallacies roll into one. The guy is arguing from a completely intellectually dishonest position. Absolutely, 100%.
I'd just like to interject here, because this is coming from the perspective of someone involved in the industry. He's right. Now, hear me out here, and this is something that I think that all of these companies need to sort out, because it's really not good practice, but Crunchyroll, all that stuff, they pay their translators like shit. It's something like it's a really low amount an episode, but the interesting thing is this is the information that generally doesn't get out a lot, but they actually limit the amount of episodes you can take on per season. So you're at the most you're limited to something like, I think it's like 4 in a week.
So essentially they're limiting how much you get paid. Because
Bingo.
That's
freelancer work, basically.
Yep. And the issue with that is that they and translation as an industry, I'll be honest, like in Japan, translation as an industry, it doesn't pay very well in general. This is coming from people who I've talked. This is people who I've talked to in the industry who are all about this. It's not an amazingly good, well-paying industry. Especially in Japan, it's something they pay per character, and it's usually something like very low amounts, and often people are on a crunch, and often the case is that translators just kind of get it thrown at them. And I think as well as that, you've also got with the pressure of simulcasts and stuff like that, and you've got to get subs and dubs up there. Subs usually. That really makes things interesting, because now you've got the low pay, but now you've also got the crunch, and that is a combination which, oh dear, yeah, that sometimes people can make not very good decisions with things like that. And also, I have read some of the at least with the English, and this is something that I can say that I've read this elsewhere. But normally, when in Japan, what they do with the with anime that is going to be going overseas or whatever is that the way they animate it is that they actually animate the lip flaps so they're designed to sync up with. I think it's designed to sync up with English or something like that.
Well, I had heard conflicting reports about that. There are people saying that Japan doesn't actually care about the lip flaps, and there's a whole bunch of it. Like I'm seeing conflicting information on that, so I don't have a solid.
Right.
If something comes out, and it's like definitive, they care, they don't care, then I'm fine. But at the moment, I'm in
at
a
the moment
position
it's up
of,
in the air.
Yeah, at the moment for me it's up in the air, because I've seen conflicting reports from people that have both worked and not worked. Like it's kind of like some people say they do, some people say they don't. So yeah.
Either way, syncing lip flaps is a common thing in dubs and stuff like that.
It is, in dubs especially. Yeah, I've
Dubs
noticed
especially,
that.
I mean, all it takes is to watch if you watch a dub like Ghost Stories, which is an incredible dub because it actually takes the anime and practically the reason Ghost Stories actually did as well as it did is because the dub did what it did.
Well, it did well in the West. I think I've been talking with a few people about that, and there's a common misconception that Ghost Stories was not popular in Japan. That's actually not. Whether or not it sold well is a different story, but from what I understand, it was actually a somewhat popular anime.
The viewership numbers of the anime were very low. There's actually statistics about that. I would
have to go dig up the thread that I was reading.
I could link you a good video that summarizes the whole thing. But
I was reading a thread that was countering, I think, that video you're talking about, where they actually looked at the statistics, and apparently the viewer numbers were actually different. Than again, but that's getting the
conversation.
Yeah, that's getting off topic. But the point I was trying to say is that there's a line in there whereby one of the characters takes the piss out of the fact that he's sort of like, he's like, oh my god, what the hell is happening? These are the fastest lip flaps I've ever had to sync.
Right.
So yeah, it's taking the piss out of the fact that they tend to sync lip flaps in dubs and stuff like that, and so that seems to be a common practice.
Yeah, I know that on the western side of things, they care quite a lot about the lip flap.
Yeah. Especially because it's like, you see it in our cartoons as well. Like, a lot of just our regular Western cartoons.
I believe that was also the reason given for the change from old-fashioned to misogynist, and the thing that sparked this all up. Yes. I personally don't buy that. I personally don't buy that.
Now, I talked to my friend who's also technically my boss. I mentioned this to her, and she said that while she would not do this, she wouldn't have done that in that way. She can see how they would have got to that from what was presented, but she said that it was definitely not the best way to do it.
I think the issue, because I'd seen another, in the response to that tweet where they explained it, there was another translator who was saying that there were definitely other options you could have gone with, because the biggest problem people have with that issue was it does completely change the meaning of what was said, because in
it's a pretty
my
loaded
eyes,
word.
Yeah, well, it's a loaded word, and it's also, when you're calling someone old-fashioned, right, you're essentially calling them a boomer, right? If we were using like current localisms. You'd be calling someone a boomer, but of course you wouldn't be calling someone a boomer in the anime dub, right? That would be kind of silly. But
And date it.
yeah. But the problem is calling someone old-fashioned is very much different to calling someone a misogynist. It would be, I think, the example I used when I was responding to people was, it would be like calling someone a raging sexist instead of an old fart, right? Like, I can understand, right, the idea that, okay, well, old-fashioned ideas, misogynism is an old-fashioned idea, I can connect the dots, but at the same time, it is a completely different meaning to, like, it's a more pacific meaning, right, to call someone a sexist rather than just say, oh, well, you're old-fashioned, or, oh, you get with the times already, that kind of thing, right? It's a very different,
This
thing.
kind of brings it around too, because like having looked at that situation, I do not think and because Sentai doesn't really, or Filmworks in the U.S. doesn't really have too much of a history trying to pull shit like this, I legitimately do not think the translator intended for the impression of that. Like, I legitimately don't, but what that thing highlighted...
It should also note down that it also comes a lot down to the voice director, because voice directors will probably have a lot more of a play in how the dub dialogue
correct
goes.
me if I'm wrong, but I do believe it was the voice director who came out on Twitter and talked about it. I think it was the ADV director.
The ADV director,
ADR.
the ADR director is the one who does all the stuff for the dub. So
right,
the
so
changes
they
that
were
are
the
made
one that
for the dub. That's all on any dub stuff. It falls on the ADR director.
Right. I'll let Lolly go.
Anyway, so just because of that, like I think what that situation really really highlighted is just the inherent distrust that people have, and that's the other thing. Like, the other thing to this isn't, for a lot of people, like, not everybody who pirates, obviously. Some people don't give a shit. For me, I kind of don't give a shit. But with a lot of people, just, like, examining their reasons, like, and taking it at face value, that the whole thing kind of shows the level of distrust people have with these companies. It's a massive PR problem. It's a PR problem that historically would have gotten people fired.
Yeah, and I think that because I have a lot of that distrust, right? Because that's why I refer to a lot of these companies as parasites. Because the way that I view them is I view them as companies that have latched onto an industry and have started kind of draining money from it, in a sense. Yes, some of that money is making its way back to Japan. That's a fact. I don't deny that. It's clear that that's happening. The issue is that in order to support that flow of money, I have to also be giving money to people that I consider to be parasites. You see what I mean? That's the inherent problem, right?
And going back with the money thing, that's also kind of a problem that I have too. I really don't have that much of a love for the anime industry as it currently stands, because
it has a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And, like, case in point, right? So, Madhouse, like, not even that long ago, there was one employee who had logged over 300 hours of overwork, right? And that was relatively recent. That was he had logged that during the run, I believe, of Overlord. Overlord was really big in the US. Funimation was getting a lot of money. And he was getting... it wasn't just that he was logging 300 hours of overtime. It was unpaid overtime. And that doesn't scream to me like the result of a healthy company that is making all of this money from this streaming deal. Like,
Sorry.
The thing, if people are going to bring up a moral argument of, well, you need to support the creators over there, I mean, I can just immediately shoot that back and be like, well, I mean, is it moral to support a system that does stuff like this?
Now, when it comes down to it, the thing here, and this is an inherent problem with not just anime in Japan, but just their work culture in general, they work they work hard, but they tend to overwork, and that's the thing. And it's more of a symptom of the work culture in their country being really predatory, and that is an issue. That's a whole can of worms in and of itself, which really
but
sort of
Funimation at this point is getting big on their britches, and they're being able to actually be in direct contact with Sony in the US. You know, their entire marketing thing, and this is what kind of pisses me off about the argument of, oh, your support, or, you know, these companies, not necessarily you, because, I mean, I get where you're coming from. I'm saying this from the company's perspective, right? When they're saying, oh, you need to support the creators, I don't see it as legitimate concern on their part. I see it as a marketing gimmick. They can't justify the utility of their service either way, so they have to basically develop a culture of moral Stockholm syndrome.
Right, and I want to jump in and say that that's a big problem I have with Crunchyroll's whole mantra of support the industry, Miles' whole thing, support the industry, and the question that I ask to people that also parrot that mantra is, support what industry? What industry are you supporting by supporting, you know, Crunchyroll and all of these other sites? Because
now
that's a big question I think needs to be pondered.
Now, I will say, and I know this will probably open a can of worms, but I'm going to say it anyway, to the credit of Crunchyroll, in some cases, the past season, over the past year, they have been actively working with Japanese studios and actively funding shows. Shield Hero's the big one.
Well, I've actually know a little bit about this because I've been looking this up. So they are currently working on the production committees for a lot of shows. Their name actually gets listed in the credits for a number of shows, as Shield Hero being one of them. And there's a lot of talk about that, and a lot of people will use that as kind of like, look, they're directly involved with, you know, the process and all of this stuff.
I mean, it's not perfect, but it's a step forward.
Well, the thing is, you say it's a step forward, right? But the thing with me is, when I see people say that, my counter to that is, okay, what are the statistics? What is the actual amount of money that's moving here? Because this is where the problem comes in, because I know that there is no statistics, because you can't get those statistics because it's NDA, right? I know that there's no way that anyone outside of Crunchyroll themselves can prove that they are actually giving a significant amount of money, because for all I know, as an outsider, right? Because I'm an outsider looking in, right? From all I know, they could just be giving the bare minimum to get a seat on the table, right? They could just be saying, hey, I want to, I want to, get a seat on the table. I want to be able to have a say in the marketing of the show, for the Western side. How much money do I have to pay? And also, another fact is that if they do this, they bypass the licensing auctions, right? They bypass having to auction into the licenses. So instead of being like, okay, we have to compete with Funimation or, so-and-so and so-and-so, they can just say, hey, here's a flat rate to get us onto the production committee. Let's, go into it. And I feel like a lot... Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people will go, they'll use that sort of, they have a seat on the table as sort of a justification to say, look, they're doing good, right? When I don't actually think that's necessarily something I would classify as doing good. I would say that's, just it's business being business, right? it's
sadly
part of it.
Due to how the industry is and due to how we've got NDAs everywhere, there's no real way to know for sure. And
exactly.
Honestly, the way I look at it is it's like what Netflix did with their Netflix originals and Amazon doing with their Amazon Prime originals and stuff like that. I feel like in the coming years we're going to see a lot of that mentality in this pop up in this industry.
Crunchyroll recently said that they're doing Crunchyroll originals now. They've recently just got announced by them. They're doing a whole bunch of Crunchyroll originals, not just Guardian High Spice, by the way.
Yeah, not just that.
That was a PR fuck up.
Oh yeah, that was a PR nightmare. I can't deny that. That was they did admit they really did a bad job with that.
To sidetrack, to tangent a little bit, I want to kind of talk about that because the issue I have with that is what they should have done was they should have announced Guardian High Spice alongside those like 6 other shows they recently announced, right?
as a debut.
Yeah, if they had announced Guardian High Spice alongside those other shows that actually look kind of good, right? And said, hey, here's a bunch of anime that we're, supporting. And then here's also this Guardian High Spice thing that we're kind of doing as our own little thing, right? I feel like a lot of people wouldn't be so mad. I think it's just the fact that they opened with Guardian High Spice thinking that the general community would have reacted positively to that, when I don't think that they have the trust in the community to kind of pull that off a little bit.
But I do think the path of the original series is going to be what potentially starts shaking things up a bit in the future, because I think that if you start having original series on platforms and stuff like that, plus if they're licensed by the company themselves, that gives them a lot more. Well, if it's the company themselves who are making them, it gives them more freedom to, where they want to put them. So increased availability,
it gives them more control.
But, yeah.
And honestly,
Yes.
though, here's the problem I have with this whole thing, right? This is just colonialism. This is just flat out colonialism. I'm gonna go there. No, I'm gonna go there.
Yep.
Because,
I'll let you go.
Because no, this is complete colonialism, and I'm using a left-wing argument for the express purpose of calling out hypocrisy. Right? See, the whole idea is, I don't know if you've I imagine everybody here is college educated, but some of us,
to an extent,
some of us might have read Edward Said's Orientalism. It's one of the things I had to read, and one of the ideas about Edward Said's Orientalism, and he's a Palestinian American. I think he worked at Columbia, if I recall, and he wrote this huge book about like European interpretation of and European intellectual studies of Middle Eastern culture, and this book just went through all that, and one of the key arguments is that this wasn't just simply like academic. This was also very much about the self reaffirmation of what it is to be European, juxtaposed against what it is to be Middle Eastern, Islamic, etc., and it kind of like reinforced their whole position as other, inferior, strange, exotic, etc., and it just like kind of othered them even more, right? But it also, what it did was it reinterpreted a lot of these works, and also reimagined them or repackaged them for European audiences in the forms of various plays or operas, musicals, things like that. And Said sees this as a complete, as a not a genuine interest, right? It's more like a sort of possessiveness, a kind of like extension of conquest and colonialism, and so like when what is anime? Anime is, at its heart, like what sets anime apart from just any other animation, and it's that it is
animation from the East.
Not even animation from the East, because there's the question of like, what about Korean animation? What about Chinese animation? Right?
A lot of them have tended to you do have cases of animation from China and Korea sort of following in the footsteps of anime.
Oh, absolutely.
If that's the case, I kind of feel like that falls under the bracket as well. But if it's its own thing, then yeah, obviously.
Well, that's the thing, is like there's something that when anime is, ever since the creation of anime, you go look back through the history of anime and anime on television with Astro Boy and stuff like that. And you trace the evolution of it. It really is its own thing. It's its own cultural product. It's very deeply tied to the manga scene, and it also becomes very deeply tied to the as the 80s come about, the computer game scene, and in the 90s the visual novel scene, and the light novel scene in the 80s and 90s as well, and it creates this whole very culturally specific continuum. Now, there was an article published, and I've been trying to find it, and I can't dig it up, partly because my Japanese sucks. But I've been trying to dig this article up where you had a meeting and it was all in Japanese. I had some help translating it from a friend. But it was all in Japanese. It was an article about the CEO of Crunchyroll, Kun Gao, at the time. I don't know if he's still the CEO.
Let me check.
You got the guy from the CEO from Netflix, and they're meeting with these industry leaders in Japan, and one of the things they started demanding, and I think if I recall correctly, I might be wrong, but if I recall correctly, Kun Gao was kind of leading the charges, is demanding that anime start to conform more to what they perceived as Western market demand, which is, even if that is just a simple blanket statement, right? And it wasn't pregnant with political ideology, because it's not what the Western market wants. It's what the political elite want, right? Let's be honest about this. It's what the political and academic elite want anime to look like, and how and what it to be like. But he said, you're going to have to start changing what you're doing to conform to these standards. And I'm like, man, holy shit, colonialism. You are.
And I think that's a fear. It's like you were saying before, like that this is a fear that a lot of people on like the pro-piracy side have with these companies, is that they are, changing the Japanese things.
Well, they're censoring. We
Yeah.
know that they're censoring. I mean, what did it? They're removing episodes from stuff. What is it, the whole Monogatari thing?
There was an uproar about that recently, and I do
there was
agree
a whole like Sword Art Online Alicization had segments removed.
Oh yeah, there was a rape in SAO, like which one? But there was a rape. There was a bad touch scene in the recent one that caused. I think even the author had to come out and apologize.
Well, that's ridiculous, right? Let's be honest, that's ridiculous because, like, it's funny because
there was worse things 10 years back that I remember.
My God, dude, seriously, there's worse things back in the 90s. Like, it's funny because I watched...
Imagine, like, any of these people were to try to license something like a Legend of the Overfiend now.
Oh, God. Or something like Wicked City.
I will say, though, that it's quite interesting. Also, I should say, Elation here are the company who seem to be the overall owners of Crunchyroll, Verve, and Rooster Teeth.
Well, at the end of the day, they're also all subsidiaries of AT&T.
Yeah.
So
by the looks
of
things, though, Kungao is still involved.
All right.
It says on his, according to his LinkedIn, he is still involved with both Crunchyroll and Elation. So, yeah.
All right, well, that's good to know. But yeah, that's what I was kind of saying, is there is definitely this sort of, I think a common thing that I'm getting from a lot of this, right, is there is a very large amount of distrust. There was a very large amount of distrust between the consumers and the people providing the product, and I feel like if we're going to kind of try and find solutions to fix these problems, I think these companies need to actually take a proper step in repairing these bridges.
Actually,
in a sense.
what I would see, I'm an old school fan, right? What I've seen, what I've been watching over the past 20 or 30 years, more like 30 years of anime fandom, because I got into anime fandom back in the 90s when I was in middle school and high school. And what I've been watching is the dramatic changes of it, from being a niche subculture and a counterculture of sorts, to now being this global phenomenon. And a lot of people are like, that's great, that's great, that's great. I'm like, no, that's fucking terrible. Because there's no way to to destroy something more quickly than to mainstream it. You annihilate what it is really about. You annihilate the value system of the counterculture and the subculture that it's all about. This happened to punk. This happened to the punk movement. This happened to punk music. That's just one example that comes to mind really, really quickly, is the mainstreaming of punk destroyed punk. And as a movement, as a genre, as a counterculture, and as a subculture, right? And it's like you look at like the jazz scene, right? The jazz scene has never really taken on. I mean, like the real art scene, like Harlem or New Orleans jazz, and you look at this smoky bar scene, right? That kind of jazz. That jazz never really went that mainstream, but it still exists. It still persists, and the whole reason is because it didn't go mainstream, right? And so what I seen happen to anime, where it used to be back in like the 90s, it was very tight knit, and you had to be tight knit because that's the only way you got your stuff, and fan subbing was not. Fan subbing, and it wasn't even considered piracy. I mean, the licensing companies actually looked at what people were getting through the fan subbing industry, and then they would license something. And when that happened, they would make an announcement, and then the fan subbers and the distributors would just stop distributing the fan subs of that product, coinciding with the licensing of it, because it was used as a barometer to see where interest lay. Now the problem that we have now is anime is successful, and it's like you've got all these people that are in it, and there's no the entire culture is different now, and some people it's like, okay, a lot of people will probably tell me, okay, boomer, just sit down and shut up, whatever you say, and it's like, and I'm just like, you know what, fuck you, because you're a poser. You're not into this shit. Right. You're not really into it. You're, like I look at like I can't remember like how many people's mouths I've looked at. Like, what are they into? High Guardian Spice, and Steven Universe, and some other like Cartoon Network or Disney production. Oh, and My Hero Academia. Oh, I'm an anime fan. I'm an anime fan because I love My Hero Academia, and it's like you look at their DeviantArt art, and it's all like freaking Fujo shit, and it's like
let's not even go there.
And it's like it's you look, and it's just from that one show, and it's like, oh, I'm like, you guys are posers. You're not real, Oh, but you can't tell me. Yes, I can. Go fuck yourself. You're not a real anime fan. Sorry.
Yeah, Phil's got some very strong opinions.
I do have some very good, because it's like these people flooded into the subculture and they killed it.
I don't even necessarily disagree fully with that. I think that there's definitely a level of the mainstreamity of it. Like,
honestly, I feel like if you can trace it back to anywhere, you can trace it back to 4Kids.
Yeah, and I can kind of like, it's almost, I don't know, it's that, what's his name?
Honestly, it wasn't even 4Kids. It was
that
Toonami.
That rapper dude who had the album. It's like suffering from success, right? That's kind of the problem. It's suffering from the success.
It wasn't even 4Kids, really. It was Toonami. And as much as I loved Toonami when it came out, and I did, like when Toonami first dropped, I was in college and it was awesome. But no, Toonami is really what did it, and it's like I kind of wish almost that it didn't happen because of this. And it's, but it's like that's the problem.
So,
like, what is
we kind of need? Sorry, I'll let you go.
That kind of is where the industry went. We have no matter what, we have this huge group of people that have flooded into the anime industry, and all they do is just consume. And like, that's not what we were about. Like, yes, we watch stuff. Yes, we consume stuff. But there was like, you were also collecting tapes. You were trading tapes. Like it was a lot of networking, because otherwise, how would you get fan sub stuff that was not released here? Like, there was this, you had to network, you had to know people. There were fanzines that were published. There was you would sit there on your like 56K dial up, waiting to just see if there was any news on the one fan site that you. And are there more episodes of Ranma 1/2 that are coming over? Like, oh man, they have it. Like, oh, we're gonna get season 4, yay! And like, like there was a lot of theories. There was a lot of discussion about it. What do people do now? Like, go look at Mao. Go look at Mao's forums. Like, it's a joke. It's a joke. You get the same 5 questions asked every freaking month by new people, and it's like, my God, like it's.
And that's and that ties back into what I was saying before, that if we're going to see some kind of change, we have to get the new people. You have to get the new people, because the people who I think people like Takashi are talking about, that already don't subscribe to Crunchyroll. Like, we already boycotted years ago, right? we already we already stopped paying our subscriptions. We already kind of like swore off it years ago.
Like,
so if we're
thinking about it,
going to see the change, got to get those newbies.
thinking about it, I feel like these services would probably do a lot better if they expanded their libraries to have a lot of the older stuff that people liked as well, and didn't shove it to the back, but actually had it. I mean, Anime Lab actually has a decent amount of older stuff. Like, it's got stuff on there like Trigun and yeah. I'll pull it up quickly and see what I can find. But it isn't uncommon to see stuff on there from before the 2000s, and I think that you're right. I think that we shouldn't forget the past and we shouldn't forget the past in general, because there's a lot of good stuff that came out of it, and and I think it should also be promoted. These things from the past should actually be promoted, because hey, there's a lot of good shows there, and a lot of ones that I personally haven't actually seen even, but I've been meaning to get round to, because I've heard, they're actually really good, and I think that.
Well, the tie-in, I guess, to go back, because this is an episode on piracy and localization. To tie back what Full was saying, though, is that this also goes into those demands to change things for a Western audience. You can see that mentality kind of manifesting itself in even sub-translations, and you can see it manifesting itself in dubs all the way back to 2000s. Again, that Gunslinger Girl DVD I have over there from Funimation, in the dub, they changed dialogue, and I remember the scene specifically because I picked up on this when I was 14. They changed the dialogue between Giuseppe and Hillshire during the... It was when they end up going to... Or when Hillshire and Triola go to Sicily to, like, contact... Or to get somebody who was getting out of the Mafia because of human trafficking. They ended up changing a dialogue to, I guess, make it less I don't know how to put this, less touchy on the subject, because the conversation in particular, I remember this, they're walking down the hall and Hillshire's like, yeah, Trail's been acting really weird lately, and then the exact dialogue that Giuseppe has is, oh, well, I mean, she's really sensitive to the needs of men, or something like that. He makes a contact with that, and that line actually ties back into her backstory. And they ended up changing that dialogue into something completely different in the dub, where it doesn't even comment on that at all, and it completely, like, changes the relationship. Like, just that line alone completely changes the relationship between Hillshire and Traila. And so we have this example of they clearly and mind you, I only knew that back then because that was during the time when Funimation had two separate subtitle tracks, one for the dub and one for the sub, something that probably doesn't exist anymore. And because of that, so we see that all the way back then, and it's obvious that even back then, Funimation kind of, and I would say the industry in the West in general, I know whenever I hear Justin Savakis over at A&N, he used to work with CPM, I believe, and he would talk about,
Central Park Media.
Yeah,
my God,
yeah,
that's a name I haven't heard in ages.
Yeah, and he would often talk about, I guess the thing, like, Tenjo Tenge, I believe, had to be pretty heavily changed in the U.S., and so there was always kind of a culture where they felt that the content of the Japanese media was inconvenient. So there was always that culture that it's a problem to bring to the West, and if it's a problem to bring to the West, if you're trying to expand it to a mainstream audience, you're going to have to change it. That's also kind of the when people are talking about not supporting these companies, like, it's not even real. The argument they're trying to give the people who aren't supporting these companies is you're killing the industry, and with the people who aren't supporting their companies, they're protecting their culture.
That's basically
That's
what
honestly
it
it.
is.
Like that's
No, that's basically
Yeah.
what it is. Because like one, it's funny because like I watched Tenjo Tenge. All of it was fan subbed at the time, and I think it was before it was licensed over here, and it was all fan subbed. And yeah, it was racy as hell, and there was a lot of like stuff. I'm like, I don't know how this would get past today. I completely forgot about that show. And then you got other examples of things like it's also like when I watch things, I try to watch them critically, and I want to see, like, I don't just passively watch things. I'm constantly observing things. I'm constantly trying to pay attention. Sometimes if it's really, really good, I will just kind of switch off and just get absorbed and like let the show cast its spell over me. But I do try to watch a lot of things very, very critically and think a lot about why do I like this, why do I not like this, what is it doing right, and so I'm watching Corpse Party, and I'm watching the very beginning episode, and it's like it's a horrible scene of this guy butchering these children, and the entire screen is black except for a corner, and I'm just hearing this stuff, and I'm like, you guys realize my imagination is far worse than what you show, so I actually went and dug up. I had to pirate it because I want to see, or rather, I don't want to enjoy because I'm not going to enjoy it, but because I want to see this, the way that the artists designed it, what they put on screen, what it is, and I watched that scene where these kids are horribly murdered, and I was disgusted by it, but it was believe it or not, it was far less than what I had imagined.
Now,
but like that's the
I just
thing.
want to bring up I just want to bring up a point here, and just regarding what you're saying, and yeah, you're right. There was definitely things back then. I think with the rise of the internet, I think that we've definitely. I mean, even in the official sphere, while you do have cases in the official sphere where things are changed or removed or dumbed down, it's become a lot less common for shows to have that stuff happen to them, and a lot of the time you generally don't see that happen. From what I've been seeing, so things have, compared to back then, things are making the jump a lot more now in a more of an unchanged manner. There are still cases where they do get changed, and yeah, that does suck, but but things jumping over an unchanged form is happening a lot more often now than it did back then.
I will say that another knock that I give to a lot of these different sites and services is they typically have issues with uncensored versions. I think, what was it called? That one, the one with the insects on Mars Attacks, or whatever it's called.
No, I think Mars Attacks is the movie.
Yeah, I think that's a movie. No, but you know the one. Terraformer, that's right, Phil, you got me there. So Terraformers had a release on Crunchyroll where it was very heavily censored on Crunchyroll. I don't think they had the uncensored version for quite a while. And that was a very, very big problem. And I feel that's a big problem with a lot of these services. They don't get the licenses to the... Because I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that there are 2 different licenses for the censored and the uncensored version. So you kind of have to pick what ones you want / get both of them if you want to be able to show both.
Not sure.
Because I think it depends... I would have to look that up, but that's just something that I vaguely recall, right? So, I feel like a lot of these sites don't necessarily get the uncensored versions a lot of the time, and I feel that's also a big knock, because as Phil just described, a lot of people such as myself, we just want to watch the uncensored version. You know,
Yeah.
like, I don't want to watch the big black bars. I want to, I want to see what's there. I want to see it.
It's not just that.
And now I want to actually. Oh, sorry.
You go first. You go first.
Alright, yeah. So, I kind of wanted to use this point in general because you do make a good point, and I wanted to segue it into talking about one of the other companies I mentioned in the tweet, which was Faku, because they tackle a very different sector.
They do.
And it's actually quite interesting what they do, because they seem to actually run the idea of, in fact, most for them, it's basically one of their requirements is generally stuff that you put on there is uncensored. Like, you can't censor stuff. So
right, and okay,
and so they it's interesting because they're the polar opposite, because they're obviously targeting adult markets.
They are,
so it's interesting to see how a company that's obviously targeting an adult market goes differently to these
So,
others.
Faku has a few problems. And a lot of these problems stem from the trust issues. Now, the trust issues with Faku stem from when they went legit. They did some very, very broken arrow type shit, right? And what I mean by that is they went legit, and then they started flying DMCAs at people, right? And one of the big ones that was getting hit by this was Sad Panda at the time. And this is me recalling from because I read, I go on 4chan a lot, I go on the porn boards a lot, right? I read what people say about things, and typically on H, if you go on H, 9 times out of 10, there'll be at least one board bitching about Faku, right? Because there's a lot of people, that are still reaving from this, from when they went legit and they started it was almost like that, because initially Faku was, as a lot of these sites, it was pirate site, right? A lot of they were alongside, Sad Panda and a lot of these other sites that do archival work and, keeping these dojins, up on the net so people can view them, especially, older stuff. But then they went legit and they started using the fact that they went legit to DMCA and almost shut down Panda. And it was really big news at the time. And a lot of people were very, very not happy about this. Because obviously you have a situation when you have a site that was a pirate site, went legit, and then is now trying to shut out competition. That's a big no-no. And then besides that, there are other questions around Faku along the lines of there's a lot of talk about artists that are on that service not necessarily getting the support that they need in comparison to more bigger names. I think, what's his name? Shalom, the guy who made Metamorphosis, I can never pronounce his name, right?
Yeah.
He's a really big guy on Faku, right? And he's come out and he's praised Faku and all this stuff. But there have been other artists that have been on Faku that say, yes, it's good if you're a big name, but there are other artists on there that don't necessarily see a lot of the benefits from the subscription and that kind of thing. So there's some talk about that. Well, let me finish because there's a few things I want to kind of get out and then I'll let you respond, right? Because I know you have some stuff to say about this, right?
Gotcha.
So there's that, and then there was also talk about translation payment, and the same kind of stuff Crunchyroll gets accused of, but I don't have much validity into that yet. But there was also the case with Hentai Haven, which I know you have a few things to talk about that, but from the outside perspective looking in, right, the Hentai Haven fiasco looked like a competition grab, right? It looked like they were coming in and they were swooping up a possible competitor because Hentai Haven was going to try and do stuff. And it basically became a bit of a shit show. And that sort of fueled a lot of the anti-Faku sentiment that had been sort of boiling under the surface, as it were, right? Because what Faku's situation is currently is they have... The way I describe it is they slit someone's throat in the form of the piracy sort of side of things with Sad Panda and whatnot. They slit the throat and the blood spilt on the carpet. Then what they did was they let the blood sit there and just kind of dry into the carpet and just sort of put a rug over it, right? And then what happened with the Hentai Haven situation was the rug kind of got moved away, they kind of peeked underneath the rug, and all of a sudden you see this giant splot of mold, right? And I feel like that's currently what Faku is in a very bad situation because all it would take is one really bad case for them. One really, really bad case, and all of that mold is just gonna start fucking taking over the room. And that's a big problem. So that's kind of my views on the Faku situation. Right. So I'll let you go, because I know you have a bit of inside type stuff to talk about that.
So, on the DMCA stuff, I can't really say much about that, because obviously that...
Yeah, it was a long time ago, so yeah.
That was a long time ago, and that just seems like it was a pretty stupid thing to do at the time. On the topic of how much artists get paid, while I can't give any specifics or things like that, I do because the stuff I do, it does involve publishing, because the people who work for, we are publishing dojins through Faku.
Yeah, so you do work with Faku, yeah.
While I can't give any specific numbers, I can say that the cut of the profit that the that the artists get is sizable.
Okay.
So they do get a cut. However, obviously, how much people get out of the service is going to depend on how much they, how much the sales are and all of
yeah.
that. And obviously, certain things, because by default, while Faku does allow things that have what they might be considered by some people to be controversial content, it generally won't be seen unless you go into the settings menu and flip a switch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and obviously some stuff is going to have limited reach anyway, so
Yeah,
it's an
that's
interesting area, because some things are going to go better than others, but I will say that artists do get treated equally, and
Yeah.
they do get...
And I'm gonna let you continue, but I just want to also say that I'm half telling you my own opinion, but I'm also giving you kind of the general,
Yeah.
right? Like, so I might
Yeah.
not necessarily agree with a lot of what I just said. I'm just kind of giving it to you so you could work with it, right? That's what I hear. So I'll let you continue.
Right. So that's basically the general area of, what goes on there. The HH stuff, that's obviously a big scene, big hoo-ha. There was a lot of confusion there.
Oh yeah.
And the thing that people tend to miss is the fact that there was an update from the HH founder later on Twitter, whereby he stated that they had actually begun to sort things out, and the reason why there was issues with communication was because there was a lot of the on Faku's side, they were very busy with sorting out upcoming expos and things like that, and they did both agree. They agreed that yeah, we made a mistake. We should really have been more in contact and told you about that. So there was a mutual understanding that they got out of it. So they did say that, both sides were like, hey, we messed up. And there was a tweet that was made about that, and I also know that someone on the team that I work with was directly involved with the exchange of what was going on between the two, so he can actively confirm it. But he no. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So
and in fact he was involved. He was involved with both HH and Faku. He's still in the HH server. In fact.
Okay.
So
the issue I have is that's all well and good, but the PR's a fucking nightmare, right? So that's the issue with Faku. Is essentially the issue with Faku, and really the only issue I have with Faku is their PR is fucking horrific right now. Because you've got all of these like people that are very distrustful, not a lot of faith, right? Very distrustful, not a lot of faith. You have this very big amount of people. I think it's a lot bigger than I think Faku actually realizes. I think there's a large amount, because a lot of them don't talk about it a lot. They'll talk about it on 4chan, and they'll talk about it, in sort of these smaller kind of hush, like
I think that's
in the
because
underground.
the subject. It's because of the subject matter of what is on the site. They don't want to talk about that publicly. Whereas
Exactly.
with something like anime, it's,
it's a bit more public, right? But so that's what I mean. I feel like there is this very large contingent of people that are very distrustful of Faku because they've either cut them in the past, right? Or they've done something that they didn't agree with, or they've done something like the Hentai Haven scenario where, from what you're telling me, it's not necessarily what was being shown on the outside, right? On the outside perspective, it looks like Faku's the conspiracy theory that Faku was the one that instigated the DMCAs against Hentai Haven to get it taken down, and then Faku can swoop in and play the savior, right? Which I'm not sure how I feel about that conspiracy theory, but that's kind of the narrative that a lot of people are saying, and that's a problem for Faku, right?
Yes.
And the problem is, Faku isn't really doing a whole lot to kind of stop that.
They did not communicate. I think the same thing is that neither party did a good job at communicating.
Oh yeah, I can agree.
That the issue had been solved. Both.
I don't even. Hang on. I don't even think
sorry.
it's a matter. I don't even think it's a matter of them communicating to everyone else that the issue had been solved, because it's the issue that because of the distrust, you needed to do a really good job of convincing people that the problem was solved. There's a difference between just having a tweet that says the problem's been solved and, oh yeah, okay, we hashed it out, it's fine, and because you have to remember, right? You're talking to people who inherently don't like you and distrust you, right? You're not just talking to people that already sub to you and already give you money and already, you're talking to that very big groundswell I'm talking about, right? That big mold patch. You're talking to them. And you're going to have to do a better job at convincing them than just saying, well, there was a miscommunication, we kind of messed it up a little bit, and I feel like that's Faku's problem in my eyes, is they don't necessarily do enough to kind of, I guess, put some carpet cleaner on the carpet, right? And be like, hey, look, yeah, we kind of fucked up, we shouldn't have done that. That was, we sort of betrayed a lot of people there, and,
So, transparent, what you're saying is transparency.
Yeah, a bit of transparency, I think, would do Faku quite well.
I think transparency for all of these companies.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, all of them, yeah. Yeah, all of them,
transparency in general. But I think that you're right. I do think that there should be a bit more transparency. And I personally want it. I hope.
I would push for that. Yeah, I would push for that.
Yeah. I want to push for more transparency. I think that out of the industries out there, Faku is probably the one that's the least.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with
that. By a country, frankly, what is a country mile at this point?
I would agree with that too. I would say that out of that list, Faku is the one that I think has done the least egregious stuff, and a lot of the stuff that they have done
they've done kind of positive things as well.
They've done a lot more. They've sort of done more positive than negative, and from experience that I've and stuff that I've seen is like they do actively support those people, and a lot of their translation isn't done in house either because it's done because they. For example, when we're not in house, Love Lab isn't in house for Faku. We just have we sort of sit on the other side.
You do your stuff.
Yeah, so it's more of a case of the companies on the outside can make the deals with the Dojin writers and all that stuff, and then Faku is basically just a platform to distribute them on.
Yeah.
And for that, they're doing a good job. And and also their website is, it's well designed.
Yeah, it's all right. I had to look at it recently. It's all right. It's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I think it could be slightly better, and it could, as you mentioned, the issue with the setting, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the way to solve that is if you sign up for an account on Faku, they should have like a little tutorial that just says, "Hey, have a look in the settings," and because Pixiv does this actually. Pixiv has this thing where if you sign up not even if you sign up, if they have like a change on the site, what they'll do is they'll have like a tutorial kind of like pop up that just says, "Hey, look, you can now zoom in. Would you like to try that now? Oh, look, you can scroll through pages now. Look, there's a little." Like transparent window that'll show up, and it has it actually looks really nice, right? It's like a little transparent window that says, "Look, this is a new feature that we added that you could do this." I feel like if Faku had something similar to that, where they said, "Hey, if you're not looking at this without an account, you're not seeing everything that we have to offer. If you sign up even if you just sign up for a free account, right?
Yeah.
That allows you to not even sign up for a subscription, just sign up for a free account that lets you.
Because you can just sign up for an account and just scroll through things. You don't.
And just see the hidden tags and that kind of thing. Like,
and I
feel
think
like
the other thing as well.
Yeah.
The other thing as well that I think is interesting is the fact that they also have one-off purchase. They have a one-off purchase option. You don't have to get a subscription.
Yes.
You can purchase things one-off.
Yeah.
And that is what.
Now, I have a question about that actually. So, does that count for digital release and physical?
I'm pretty sure it does.
Because if let's say I just wanted to buy the rights to be able to download something. That's like a one-off purchase to be able to download a Dojin, right? Like without having to get the sub. Because that's something that I believe a site that I recently came across called 2D Market. They do something similar where it's like you just pay like €3 and you get to download the thing. And so they're pretty good. I haven't used them yet, but I hear that they're alright, so I'm gonna try them out at some point.
Those were, if I recall, 2D Market were the Mad Lads who fucking licensed a rustled tank.
Alright.
Am I the only person who knows who Russell is as an artist? Okay, I see where I stand here.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're the only one.
Uncultured fuckwad.
So but yeah,
You know
no,
about the floors.
So no, I feel like there's definitely there's stuff that I think Faku could probably do, and I'm remembering now another thing that people were pissed about was the Honey Select release. A lot of people were happy about
wow. Yeah,
I'm trying to
the only way
remember
you could get
what happened there.
a good version of that is to go to this like one dude who repacked it. It was full of friggin' viruses.
and shit, yeah.
Well, yeah, but it was also full of viruses from what I've heard. I did not download it.
Yeah, on 4chan, people were not happy with how they released.
Well, that's
I
nothing
think
new.
that was
I mean,
one
like,
of
look
their.
at-
It was one of their earlier releases, I think.
No, it's
It might have been. Well, I think because they've.
you're talking about
what
Illusion
else did
games.
they
That's the
do?
thing is you're talking about Illusion
Yeah.
software games.
All right, Illusion.
And the thing with Illusion
Yeah.
software games is they're never going to be released without massive amounts of butchery and destruction to what the game is.
What
in the
game
West.
was it? It's Kuritsu Party. Is that
Koikatsu, yeah.
Kukatsu, yeah.
Koikatsu.
Yeah. I always say it wrong. I'm horrible with that. That's
Yeah,
part of my
Koikatsu. Here it is, right at the top. Koikatsu
Yeah,
Party.
and they
so they,
90% of what that game really is not in the game. And
Well,
that-
to their credit, the Steam version is butchered, but that's primarily because of they had to take the school aspect out
oh
of
yeah,
it.
which is
Oh yeah,
99%
and I'd like to
of the
say,
game.
I'd like to just say a word about Steam because they are a loose cannon. Like,
very much are,
honestly,
yeah.
there is no people, it's hard to get some of the stuff on Steam. You don't realize how difficult
Look,
it actually is.
It is really hard, yeah.
It can heavily depend on whoever is just reading the thing that morning. Like, for example, there's one I can't say what it is.
Yeah,
Or
fair
anything
enough,
about it, but there was a case where we've actually had to pick up a release that couldn't make it onto Steam, and we're going to be trying to push it onto Steam ourselves, all because the submission failed. And I think if it fails, I don't know how. I think it's rather difficult to push it again.
Lude Logic, who's the guy that runs Critical Bliss, right, who I talk to quite a lot, he's talked to me a lot about how Steam is just fucking crazy sometimes.
And that's one thing that Faku does do well, and the fact is it's a lot easier to get stuff on there.
It's a lot. Well, back to speaking specifically about this game.
There's a site in Japanese. I can't remember what the hell it is. Oh, DL site. That's
DL
it.
site?
Oh,
They
DL site's
already, well, they
great.
already have shit.
Support
They
DL
already
site.
have shit in English in some places. What? No,
Yeah.
this is what anime fans need to do, or well, just perverted anime fans or whatever. All right, don't go for your. First of all, you need to put the English shit up there, and DL site really needs to start advertising more in the West. The big problem is, oh well, international boundaries. Like, motherfucker, it's the goddamn internet.
See, DL site. I like DL site and how they operate because they kind of have a system now where you can request a translation. So if you see
really?
a game on their site, yes. So the way it works is they have like a little box on this page for a game if it's not translated into English or any other language actually, and you can actually submit a request for translation. And if a game gets enough submissions, then they'll consider doing an official, like they'll pay for the translation.
Oh, that's
because
awesome.
a lot of the devs on DL side are very, very independent, like very indie, like Steam Greenlight type indie, right? So they're not really in a position financially where they can kind of afford to pay for translations or translate themselves technically. So a lot of them will. They can't, right? So they'll have they'll have their games posted on the English DL site, but they'll be heavily reliant on fan translators or whatnot.
or
Or external translators
or
or things like
external-
what I'm
Well,
doing.
let's
what you're doing.
Let's
Yeah.
be honest. The
So-
Arrogate industry is not a AAA industry.
Oh no!
It is.
Oh,
never
oh
been.
no!
It isn't.
Oh no!
Mind you, it has a lot of problems. And I will say, having been to Japan recently, that in Japan it's quite crazy. Like, I walked into a soft map at one point and went up a couple of floors.
Yeah, you were talking about this on Twitter, I remember.
Massive display for 9-9, as well as my Tetsu and
Yeah.
other titles. And you go in there, massive floor of just pre-owned Aero Day, and then there's another floor which is just new stuff. And like most of the boxes are just.
I hope they
don't bother
spray
to
like
hide
they
it.
spray with anti-disinfectant. I can only imagine.
It's all cling wraps.
Yeah.
All of the
Okay,
boxes
good.
are individually
Yeah,
cling wrapped.
the
and
last
sleeved
time
and stuff. Seriously,
the last time I was in Japan, I saw like ridiculous ads that were extremely revealing and for Aerogay. The last time I was in Japan, which was like 10 years ago, but still, yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, this shit's everywhere.
It's a big
It's
market.
it's
It's a
an
big
enormous
market, yeah.
market, even though the industry is still like not very AAA, and it really is pretty much like 90% of the industry is kind of indie. You're right. It's an enormous market.
But you see, here's the thing. I actually view that as a good thing.
Yes, it's
I
grassroots.
actually think the fact that a lot of these, because obviously you have your big names, as we just talked about, Illusion and
Illusion. Then you got front ring. You got Lose. You got
yeah. Like
Flippin'
you obviously have your big names, right? Like you got your huge names, but then you've also got all these kind of little guys. You got like 111. You got Circle Streak, which is a div that I like to follow, right? These more kind of RPG maker almost type.
Circle Tempo, who did a title called Myth, which was released at Comcat that did get an official English translation.
Yeah.
It's actually quite good. It's a bit of a mindfuck thing, but yeah.
Yeah. So I find that the fact that it's a little bit more decentralized is actually really good, and how you don't have like these giant mega, names. Like, it's not like in the Western gaming industry where you have like your EAs and your Bethesdas and your Microsofts and it's more like you've got like the really, really well known devs that make
you got ones that are
bigger
bigger
titles.
than others.
Yeah,
Like
that make the
Key.
bigger
Key's a big
titles,
one.
and Key, yeah, obviously like your bigger titles.
Key,
but then
Key and Front Wing.
but then there's room on places like DL Site to have the little guys. There's room to have and a lot of those little guys actually do really, really well. Like 111, he does really, really well. So
Honestly, there was even in stores, I was seeing a lot of stuff from the little guys. Like there was so many boxes of just, and most Ergo and visual novels there come in these big PC game boxes. I got one on my shelf right behind me, so they're all like big cardboard boxes.
Big cardboard, yeah.
They also tend to have a lot of goodies inside, but which is nice. But you'd go up to a floor and I was going through there was so many things from so many different companies, and it was just like it was crazy. And then there's even independent stuff up there. It's like it's everything in the kitchen sink.
That's why I really like sites like DL Site and that kind of thing. And I'm
but
glad
but this was even in a physical store.
And you're right. Even in the physical store,
the playing field is pretty level.
Yeah, and that's what I like about the industry, I guess, in a sense, is that there's room to have more of the little guy sort of, sell their stuff and be at least mildly successful. But yeah, back to DL Site for a minute. Yeah, I like DL Site, and I like that also there's a lot of people like, I believe, Kagura Games that have been taking a lot of these little devs and giving them a chance on Steam as well. So there has been a little bit of cross contam going on, which is really good. A lot of devs, right? Like, they've had devs like the guy that did Terrible Laboratory and the one that did this other game that I'm blanking on the name now. But these are devs that I have personally been following for years, that I've been keeping an eye on because I like the look of their games, and I've been waiting for kind of, translations or fan translations or whatever, and they're suddenly getting put on Steam, and I can suddenly buy them and then patch the game to put the sex back in, and it's like, that's great.
That's what some of these games are doing.
I will say this was another big thing that happened recently, just quickly. So my boss, who does, she sometimes does other stuff outside of the company, but one project that she worked on recently was something called, I'm trying to find the Oshirabu, which is now the interesting thing about Oshirabu is that it was simultaneously released in Japan and in English territories.
Mm.
So while it was being made, there was a translation going on, so it had a release all around the world
simultaneous
at the
release, yeah.
same time, with an H version available on platforms, with uncensored stuff. So this was a point when the English side is directly involved, and it makes a simultaneous release all around the world at the same time, and it's all in its uncut glory, and yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that we need. I honestly feel like we need something, a similar kind of movement to happen within, anime in terms of our distributions.
I think the interesting thing is that when you do look at the visual novel scene compared to the anime scene, there's a big difference in how they've evolved, and that the visual novel scene is generally a lot more open. People in the visual novel scene are generally a lot more open-minded, and we want to stick to, people want more integrity in their translations and things like that. But at the same time, we're also like we're not. Well, we know that not all fan translations are amazing. Like, holy shit, I've read some terrible fan
a lot of machine
translations.
translation, man. Let me tell you.
I was just about to say we're moving into a new era where we're getting the new tag of machine translation brackets edited bracket, and that's now going to become a very big thing, I think.
And again, this is another thing I'd like to link, but the thing with machine translation and editing, it just does not replace a real person.
No, it
doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
You absolutely cannot. And the thing is that I think that's why there's always still going to be a market for this kind of stuff. But I think in the visual novel community in general, there's a lot of people care about. We care about having a good translation and stuff like that, but it doesn't matter. But if there's a bad translation of a visual novel, it will get slammed. It doesn't matter if it's a fan or an official translation.
There are certain sites that I go to kind of keep an eye on certain releases, right? Yeah. But even on those sites, on those forums, if you look at the comments, if the post says X game machine translation edited, every single fucking post will be like, fuck off. Right? Like even pirates, right? Even the pirates have standards, in a sense, right? It's
even fan, and the thing is as well, this is the other thing, is because I noticed that this is one thing I got in my original tweet about a lot of people sort of like praising fan translations and acting like they were always better than the official subs, and sometimes sometimes fan translations can be better, but the thing is that the difference from how the anime community perceives fan translations and how a lot of people who are, a lot of people swear by them and things like that, compared to the visual novel community, where a lot of the time fan translations, they're fine, but there's a lot of bad ones out there. If there's a bad fan translation out there, it will get absolutely slammed by the community. Like I tried reading 11 Eyes recently, and I had to drop it because not only was the fan translation was full of typos and editing problems, and I'm pretty sure one scene which felt like an absolute asspull was probably more of a result of the translation than it was the actual story itself. And I just dropped it. It was unreadable, and the thing is, people were with me. But if something gets a bad translation, whether it be from a fan or an official translation in the visual novel community, it gets slammed. It always gets slammed. If you get a bad fan subs or something in the anime community, it's not as common really to see that getting slammed.
That's kind of funny because back in the day, it was very, very different. Back in the 90s, it was very different. I mean, you got your bad translations and stuff, and you had some rivalry between the fan subbers, but nothing like you saw in the aughts. Nothing like you saw in the double O's, man. That was a completely different era of fan translation. It's really weird. But there, like I said, in the 90s, there was this very much different approach to how fan translation was handled and fan sub distribution was handled. And it was, I'll tell you what, it was damn near impossible to get games fan translated. I mean, I had a friend who got games from Japan, and he had to download and print out a big, thick, freaking it was like 150 pages. I forget what game it was, but it was like 150 pages of just like translated dialogue. It was some RPG. It was like 150 pages of translated dialogue, and like as he played through the game, he's flipping through this shit because you know, and he had to mod his PlayStation in order to get it too, to get it to run because back then they were region locked, and yeah, it was like the amount of work we had to do to get shit, man. And God forbid you wanted to get a visual novel. Oh my God.
And this actually ties into a thing that I also, as per someone in the visual community, kind of really hacks me off. But just before that, I did want to say that the scene, whether you like you said with fan translations, has definitely changed, and I find it interesting because while in VNs, if it's a bad translation, no matter who it's from, it gets slammed. In the anime community, it seems often it's only the official subs that get slammed if there's an issue with them, even if the fan...
Now it is.
Now.
It's kind of...
Now it is. It didn't used to be like that.
Not even
now...
5 years ago, or 5 to 10 years ago, it wasn't like that. I remember when... what was it? When Horizon in the Middle of the Nowhere came out, and Hidena was the only people subbing it, they got slammed daily.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. It's an interesting shift though, because I think that I find it interesting at least. But on the topic of VNs and stuff like that, and that's one of the things of why I really hate how we have bad translations or things like that. The thing is, in anime, it's often you can have multiple types of subs. You could have different fan sub tracks or something like that. So sometimes, if there's like a bad official track, there might be a good fan sub track. With visual novels, they're massive, and if there's an English translation in any form, even if it's one of those shite machine translated edited ones, then usually that is all you're going to get. No one's going to go out of their way to actively fix it or make a fixed version.
That is annoying.
Unless it's really popular.
Yeah,
unless it's really popular. And even then, sometimes you have cases where no matter how many translations something gets, they all suck. Like, let me show you... just quickly before you this. But cross-channel, 3 translations, all of them suck ass. You have the I think the Amaterasu translation was the first one, and that one's just Amaterasu have a very meh track record. Like their translations read okay, but apparently it loses a lot of prose and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to compare the rewrite Sekai Project translation when that comes out to the translation that Amaterasu did. But Amaterasu did the first one. It's okay. It's probably the most readable of the 3, but it still kind of like misses a lot of the point because Cross Channel is a very prose-heavy visual novel. There was the third translation, which was which is basically just machine translated, edited, so it's terrible.
Yeah, it is terrible.
Then there's the second one by a dude called George Henry Shaft, and this guy is nuts. Like, no, seriously, I'm not overestimating it. He wrote an entire book on translating this VN. I shit you not.
Why?
Because he was crazy. And his translation reads like the ramblings of a madman. It's a massive joke in the community because
he's just on crack.
Nuts.
He's just on crack in a corner, just typing out fucking.
I'll have to look this up. That sounds funny as hell.
Actually, let me find the there's a let me try and find yeah, so there's a thread here.
Because that's a very good point, right, about VNs being really big. So when you get the translation, because like a lot of these VNs, people don't seem to understand that shit's like novel. Like, it's called a virtual novel. It's called a virtual novel for a reason, right?
Yeah. Also, I should note that George Henry Shaft translated an entire series of VNs he didn't even frickin' like. So
because
it's like it's not. Yeah, I present you a collection of excerpts from this crazy random. Here we go. So here's a collection.
Yeah,
of excerpts from this dude. So this is from his article on. This is the book that he wrote on translating cross-channel, and I shit you not.
Since the Garden of Eden, it's been clear that Adam's sin was to be a. Okay, give me a second.
No. This is epic. Okay. All right.
All right.
When the 60s promised free sex for everyone, Feminism 2.0 said that skanks were the true women, and the 10 says that even being suspected of thinking about a woman is rape. What we have in Takeda is the clear showcase of a pattern, not a coincidence. Well, okay, I don't know who Takeda is or any of that shit, but so far everything is 100% accurate. That girls, or rather girl-shaped creatures, would be the crux of the issue should be unsurprising. If gammas are followers rather than leaders, making them immediately disliked by the leader-seeking women, the women are instead easily tempted by what at least looks strong in comparison. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so far so good. Since the Garden of Eden, it's been clear that Adamson was being too much of a beta to tell a sneak what to do with his temptation. Okay, yeah, okay. And too much of a cuck to tell Eve he'll have no part in any of that nonsense. Everything here is factual and 100% correct as far as I can tell.
It's based in Red
Yes!
Pill.
Yes, this is based in Red
It's
Pill,
also
man.
still kind of crazy to write an
amazing.
entire novel based off of a VN.
Yeah, so he translated cross channel. He wrote this entire novel. It's essentially what would happen if you know. I saw an argument in the thread about people saying I'd rather have translation notes for everything just to explain things.
Yeah.
This is literally what you would do. This is the
gotta
translation
read-
notes
you
for
gotta
the
read
visual
my-
novel.
you gotta-
Man. You're making it sound like his...
It's 339 pages long.
Have you ever heard of House of Leaves?
I have not.
It's one of the best postmodern horror novels ever written. Like, this reminds me of this. This reminds me of House of Leaves. How, like, there's footnotes everywhere. And, oh, dude. Yeah. It's...
All right. So yeah, that's ooh, that's some
This
based
entire
in Red Pill.
podcast has went places.
Oh, yeah, well...
Yeah, we've gone some.
No,
well,
we
I mean,
made it
let's
when
be
we've
fair.
had a true gamer moment.
And we've
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
never...
Oh yeah,
we've never
this is another one. This one's just
Okay, hang on.
batshit.
An
guy's
an
mental,
analog is
seriously.
a complex video game with deep themes compared to the likes of ROM, read-only memory, which is pure self-flagellation for anyone so dumb as to bother reading it. AI rights are a pure brain pony non-theme on the same level as the ethics of eating unicorn meat, an evil KKK corporation less a threat to them than they were in the 80s. Umineko's Umineko's properly intellectual stupidity is a faraway pipe dream compared to that. This is
Did Rika Fag write this?
I give him no credit, man. I can't believe how much you guys bash like.
No, I like him. I like
I've
him,
never,
but at the
I've
same
never had
time-
these insane conversations with him that you guys have had with him, where he just comes off. Oh man, every time I've talked to
Oh
him,
yeah,
he's
no,
like,
I'm
mostly
not, I'm
"Oh,
not
Ellie.
bashing. I'm not. Yeah, I'm not
mostly
bashing.
Ellie.
Yeah, I'm not bashing Rika. Yeah, I'm not.
I would
it's mostly Ellie that
unironically
has
want
bad
him on
problems.
here at some point.
Every time I've talked
Yeah, we're
to him,
gonna get.
he's been an alright guy. I can't.
Yeah, we're gonna get Rika. We're gonna get Rika on one of these casts one day, and it's just gonna be Ellie versus Rika the cast, where they just try and kill each other like they do every single time they meet. Just, But anyway, getting back,
yeah.
getting back
Slight
onto,
si-
onto
slight
the track.
sidetrack,
Slight
but yeah.
sidetrack. Getting back onto the
The
track.
point
is-
being
yeah.
that we've had three. Even with popular things, we can have multiple translations and they still suck.
They can still be shit. Yeah. So
And whereas with anime, it's a lot easier to
So
translate.
I guess,
translate
yeah.
it.
So I guess to enter into kind of like a closing sort of, area, right? We have to kind of sort of talk about, right? Where do we go from here, right?
Yeah.
Because my stance is and will always be, do not support the parasites, right? That's always going to be my stance. My stance is going to be, I do not want to give my money to people that I feel are not providing me with a proper service and that I feel are doing shady shit, right? So I think that a very good point in this cast that I think came up quite a bit was the idea of trust. And I think that if we're going to fix this, two things either or need to happen. These companies need to realize the damage that they have done, and they need to at least make attempts to rebuild that trust with the user base, rather than solely relying on new users coming in to fill the gap, right? Or and/or, I'll put an and/or there because both of these things could happen, we need to have grassroots new movements and teams rise up that people can divert their money to, right? Because
That was one of the things I
yeah,
did mention in the threads. Like,
Yeah.
if you're going to take your money away from something,
you got to put it
why
somewhere
not?
else.
Why not try and build something up which people can then put it into, which
So-
aims to do better?
So I think the idea of telling people to build something new, right? Not everyone's able to do that. There's lots
Yeah.
of logistical problems with that, and obviously it's very difficult. But I feel like in the current age where people's ability to directly support artists and people that they like is more available than ever. You have, Kickstarter projects such as Ninetales and their project to localize Versus Blood, which is a resounding fucking success, by the way. Go buy Versus Blood, it's fucking great. Really, really good. You can get it on Just USA. I got my Kickstarter version through Just USA to test Just USA out, and they work really well, except when they think that my computer is Japanese, but that's a completely different problem.
Locale editor.
Yes, it's my locale on my main computer is in Japanese and I have it set to Japanese, and I think you'll know why I have it set to Japanese.
I got a program that can help you with that.
But getting back on track because I got a bit off topic there. Kickstarter projects. You've got Chinin, which is DL sites built in Patreon type thing where you can support devs that way if you wanted to support devs that way. There's obviously Pixiv Fanbox is one that a lot of people have been talking about lately as being a really good way to support illustrators directly, right? There are numerous ways to support individual artists, right? And I think that what needs to happen is we need to start diverting money away from these mega corporations and start, I'm sounding almost a little bit socialist here, right? Like we got to take the money away from the big corporations and move it into the,
Well, the thing
more
is that
indie
sometimes even the worst people, make good points. So,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Even really socialism at that point is actually a form of It's actually a form of competition.
No, that is a point
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
wanted to make and
yeah.
I haven't had a chance to. That this is actually it is competition, and not only that, it's competition I want to recognize because it's not technically legal. But when you pull shady shit like this, black markets will always rise, and black markets are competition for the quote unquote legitimate markets, and not only that, the part of the problem is also, I think what we ought to do is just kind of accept the divide in the in I don't want to say community because it's not a community. The kind of accept accept the divide that there's going to be the posers and the the shonen fans that just watch shonen and shit, and they're just gonna get their drip feed. They're gonna basically like open their mouth like baby birds and let Funimation drop the worm in, or whatever. They're gonna exist. We're not gonna get rid of them. I mean, the day and age that I miss is I have to accept is gone. That's gone. But the we can kind of like create another subculture, grassroots subculture that is kind of and accept that they're going to disparage us. Like, yeah, they're going to call us names. They're going to think we're this, that, or the other. But screw it. Like, we're going to a competitor source that's giving us the thing we want. And that's the thing. Is like they don't want to accept that this is a competitor, but it's what it is. It is a competitor, and they're giving us what we want.
I guess the closing sort of way to sort of talk about this is that piracy is, at the end of the day, a service and convenience problem, right? It is an issue of people are flocking to the method that they feel is the most convenient and also is, it's offering them something that they feel
can't
is a
get
better
elsewhere.
yeah, well, that not just that, but it's offering them a product that they feel is superior to the one being offered by the official service, right? And I think that if we're ever going to try and get to a point where we're trying to combat piracy, because you can't eliminate it completely, and it shouldn't be, I think sites like, obviously, Sad Panda and, places like Now and all that have these archives, right? Because piracy is really good for archival purposes because there's a lot of shit on. Hell, not even talking
Posterity.
about porn.
No, like
Yeah, not even.
this shit.
Archiving isn't
I cannot understate that. Understate that. I mean, there is so much lost media. I mean, like,
Yeah.
there is so much lost anime media.
I remember reading something about like most movies before a certain
Before the
period,
Hays Code,
maybe
yeah.
before a certain period of time are lost.
Oh yeah, before the Hays Code. Yeah, like there's a whole lot. Yeah, because they just got rid of this stuff. And from what I see is like there is no attempt. There is no attempt, and they're trying to do away with physical media, which makes
Makes
archiving,
digital archiving
makes archiving in at all more difficult, right? Everybody's trying to phase out physical media. Nobody cares about physical media.
Except in Japan. Japan seems to be embracing.
And Japan has like
for
their
as
own, like the manga museum archives. And that
for as
kind of
technologically
thing,
advanced as they are also really, really quote unquote behind the times. But in a good way.
They use fax
right?
machines
in a good way.
Yeah, but
they're clinging on to the older things that work.
Yeah,
Whereas
definitely.
we've just sort of ditched everything.
But
that's old.
as I was saying, was that stuff like Sad Panda, right? Sad Panda doesn't just have porn on it. There is a lot of like old magazines, old scanned stuff from like the 80s and 90s, old art books, old instruction manuals for different like tabletop games. There is a lot of stuff that's on like Sad Panda that you just can't find anywhere else. It just doesn't exist. And that's why when Sad Panda had its little scare where, it was looking like it might actually be gone, a lot of people were fucking panicking.
I heard that it was cleaned out.
No, it wasn't.
I've never been able to get into Sad Panda. I know. I've read all the descriptions.
You never got past the panda.
I tried to do what everybody said to do. I did all the things. I couldn't get into Sad Panda, so I've never been in there.
That's funny.
It's kind of a shame too, because like one of the things that's really good for just getting past that is a lot of Hideo Azuma's like Comiket. The Comiket circa 1982 stuff is up there, and it's.
Are you shitting me?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff on Sad Panda that it's just fucking impossible to find anywhere else, and it's really crazy.
And it'd be awesome if that stuff got licensed,
Well,
Wouldn't
yeah,
it be awesome?
well, exactly, but we're also, it's
yeah.
So to kind of cap off, right? Because I mean, we've been going for like almost over 2 hours now. We've been, this is a really good cast. We've had a really good discussion, I think, about a number of different issues. I feel like in order for us to sort of push to solve this problem, I think that, as I said, I see kind of two paths that sort of can work in parallel. We need to both try and get these companies to admit fault and to admit there's an issue, and then work to solve the issue and to regain trust. And we also need to start diverting our money, not necessarily obviously into piracy. Piracy is going to be a big part of that because obviously people are going to pirate no matter what, but to also divert that money into smaller projects, such as your own Nat, right? Such as what you do, such as what people like Tanashi does with his own thing, such as what 2D Market does, such as what Ninetales and their Kickstarters for localizing games do, right? We need
Visual
to
novel studios and localization places.
We need to start diverting money away from the parasites and start becoming anti-parasitic, is how I describe it, right? We need to kind of be like, right, this company's doing something that we find to be parasitic, right, that's it. We need to stop supporting them.
If you don't like the practice of an industry, you buy out the industry, basically.
Yeah, we have to divert the flow of money, and that's what I think the solution at the end of the day. Because at the end of the day, we live in a society where money speaks, right? Money is the main thing, and it's what we use as our source of power to be able to, as consumers, to tell companies what's wrong. So, end of the day, that's kind of my stance. So I'll let you guys kind of go off because.
I'll go. I guess I'll go next. I agree with you by and large, except for like the whole part that these companies are ever going to apologize, or change their model. No. No, not without like massive restructuring from the top down.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. So, and you know, if some of these companies fold, then you're going to have part of the a lot of these bad actors flooding into in trying to find a home. And it's funny because Raging Golden Eagle just dropped a video today where he's talking about, the tide is.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
The tide is going to start turning,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, the tide is going to start turning. The pendulum is going to start swinging the other way, and I agree 100% with Raging Golden Eagle. I have no pity for these people. Thank you very much.
All right. So, anyone else got anything to say?
Yeah. Translating is hard. Sometimes,
Yep.
I mean, you're not wrong.
sometimes the sentence you are given gets completely changed to the point it's unrecognizable and has a different context and flow and whatever. Simply because the end sentence ends with a yo.
That's an exclamation point, man.
Yeah. Well, Ellie's been playing Solaris this
Yeah,
whole time. So
no, he's our visual guy.
That's because
Yeah.
the new DLC just dropped, isn't it, Ali?
Oh,
No, in 2 days.
Oh, it drops in 2 days. Okay.
Yeah, I'm failing and being horribly inefficient dealing with the Great Tempest.
Oof.
I've been
Alright.
busy playing Cataclysm the last few days for reasons that can't be named on YouTube, unfortunately.
Yep. All right. Well, all right. I'll let Lolly go. So, Lolly, what do you?
For my recommendation, like we were talking about, just the problem isn't even necessarily just the Western side of the industry. The Japanese side of the industry has legitimate production problems that is driving out people who are creative into seeking other avenues. Again, that's the whole thing that I kind of that kind of blew me away about this. People were assuming the anime industry is some sort of monolith.
No, it's not.
It's not a monolith, and you don't worship it.
No, it's not.
So, when you have things like, the guy with A1 Pictures actually dropping dead from overwork, or you have people who are getting, like, hours and hours of overtime that's
Unpaid overtime.
Yeah, unpaid overtime, and you have just an entire structure that one global problem that can't be named on YouTube causes everything to run to a screeching halt. It kind of... It begs the question, why are you pumping money into, why are you pumping up money to, keep this system afloat? It's going to collapse one way or another, if not from global circumstances, from the sheer creative drain that's going on.
Oh, it needs a market correction. Absolutely. The anime industry needs a market correction. Also, you're mentioning all these terrible conditions. Is it any, have you heard about the conspiracy theories about the Kyoto animation fire?
Yeah, I've heard those.
Oh,
the old Latin term, cui bono, man. I'm not going to put my tinfoil hat on, although there have been times where I have entertained it. And I'm not going to say, it definitely was a conspiracy, but there are things about it that made me scratch my head and say, huh. And there are things about it that made me say, wow, this benefits a lot of people that it shouldn't. So,
all right, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I just got off of listening to a conspiracy podcast the friend of mine linked me to, and I should link it to you as well, because I'm not saying that anything this guy's talking about is legit.
Look,
no, it's crazy. It is absolutely crazy. But at the same time... The title of the video was still The Esoteric Kobe Bryant, and that is hilarious.
I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens. Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah.
No,
I'm not saying the moon landing didn't happen, but look.
Yeah, no.
It's
this thing that I was linked to just has stuff like that, and man, that's kind of the really screwed up thing. You mentioned the thing about the fire and that, and I'm remembering this conversation that I just listened to with that, and it's man, this is how people fall down those crazy holes.
This is this is how
The
you fall down the
rabbit hole,
pit. All right, so
This is how you
so-
become a George Henry Shaft.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, so Nat, since you're the guest of honor, I'll let you close out with your final thoughts.
Right. Well, it's been a very interesting discussion, and it's certainly something from the start when I initially made the tweet. My views and the things that I've learned have definitely changed the matter. I realised that there is definitely a lot of broken stuff in the industry, and it's inherently difficult to change. However, I do realise that, hey, people are interested in fixing it as well, and there is some cases where some companies are getting hate that probably isn't deserved, namely Faku, but most of the time, yeah, I can see why there's a reason behind the hate. I do think that at its core, though, I think at the core, though, supporting people in what they do, at least supporting the creators and stuff, is still the right thing to do, obviously. Yeah. And if you're pirating but you're still somehow getting money to the creators, then that's fine. If you're just freeloading for the sake of freeloading,
I think at the end of the day, all of us, right, want to support the people that make the stuff we enjoy in some level, right? I think that's kind of like, obviously, as you mentioned, you're going to get your freeloaders and your people that don't actually, do anything, right? But I mean, I've got a heap of merch in my room. I've got a heap of stuff. I'm going to a fucking con tomorrow because local con I'm going to tomorrow, where I might buy some stuff. So I feel like
there's a con tomorrow.
And where I'm at, there is. It's a small local one. It's like really,
Is it still going
really
to continue? Is it
let
still going to
me,
happen?
okay, so we can't say much about that because again YouTube. But let me just say that Jinro cosplay is going to be in hot demand.
But anyway, okay.
What
back to
about
I was saying.
Bane?
Oh, Bane, oh no. Okay, so I feel like, in the end of the day, we all want to support the artists, right? We all want to support the people that actually put in the work, right? And actually make the stuff that we enjoy at the end of the day. It's just a matter of trying to strike that balance between sticking up for what we believe in, as well as being able to make sure the people we like get fed, right? So I think that we need to try and find that sort of equilibrium between the people that are kind of, don't support these companies for, whatever valid reason they might have, because there's many valid reasons as we've gone through, right? But also we need to still keep it in the back of our heads, right? That at the end of the day, if there was no money going into this, then we wouldn't be getting what we're getting at the end of the day. Or at the very least, it would be a lot harder for us to get what we are getting, right?
Or we'd be actively moving backwards.
Or we'd be able to, yeah, exactly. But anyway, I'll let you continue and finish off if there was anything else you wanted to say.
That's basically most of what I wanted to say. Aside from that, but it's been great. It's been great having a discussion about this. So thank you for having me on.
Oh no, it's a pleasure.
It's good.
Before we
It's good to have a
close
discussion.
off, before we close off, though, like since this was 2 hours of your life, I feel like yeah, we don't have like a far reach or anything. But is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah.
Fair
Well,
enough.
hey, support the. Well, for me, I'd just like to say that while the anime industry may be a bit wobbly, VN industry, they're doing the people doing translations and stuff in the visual novel industry. They're doing a great job, and honestly, just give them your support. Keep an eye on Love Lab.
If you got
we've got-
if you got any links to them to Love Lab
Um,
or whatever, post them
yeah,
in the chat, and
we-
we'll get Ali to put it in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
description when we
That's a good
get the
You
video
can keep track of our Twitter.
Yeah.
Twitter for so we have our Safer Work Twitter, which is just at Love Lab Japan,
All right.
and then we have our other Twitter, which is for our
For the fun times.
yeah that one, which I'm just gonna try and find. But
Yeah,
it
we'll sort that out. We can arrange to have that put in the description for you. So if anyone wants to if anyone wants to, check out
here
Love
it
Lab,
is.
if anyone wants to check out Love Lab and the work that they do to bring these virtual novels over to the West, localized and translated, then check them out at Love Lab Japan on Twitter, and you can look at the link in the description to find maybe some fun times.
Yeah, and stay tuned because we have some announcements coming soon. So
Yeah.
you heard it here first.
I also just.
All right, I think that was awesome.
I also wanted to say thank you for putting up with my shit.
Oh yeah,
fine.
no, for having you aboard,
my hot
man.
takes. So there you go.
Yeah,
Hey,
no,
that's the whole point of a discussion.
Yeah, and I think we've had a very, very productive, very fruitful sort of talk here, and I'm very, very happy that you were able to come on and talk.
Now
with us
get the
about
hell
this,
off my lawn.